Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. I am the living devil, and the Empress advises me to calm down. Chapter 41. Shangguan Wanner's arrival broke the slightly awkward atmosphere. Her Majesty regained her composure, her dark and deep eyes revealed majesty. Qianlong's letter. Since the two countries completely tore their faces apart, they have completely entered a state of war. There is no possibility of any correspondence. This is the first time that Qianlong has sent her a letter. Shangguan Wanner hurriedly presented the letter in her hand. The general opened the letter in his hand, looked at it for a few times, and a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. He is dreaming, she immediately said lightly. Call all those officials over. I have something to discuss. Shangguan Wanner responded respectfully and then withdrew. Wait until Shangguan Wanner left. Her Majesty the Empress pinched the letter with her slender white fingers and handed it to Yang Yi, smiling. Look, Qianlong asked us for his military minister Nuru Nein. Nuru Nein was escorted to Luoyang yesterday. Yang Yi took the letter, glanced at it, and couldn't help laughing. Nuru Nein is a descendant of the Qing nobles, and is Qianlong's trusted general. Of course he doesn't want his generals to be captured by my great Zhou. Wu Zhao pondered slightly. Qianlong probably intends to pay some price to exchange Nuru Nein. What conditions do you think we should propose? Yang Yi blinked, staring straight at the cold and noble Empress. Your Majesty plans to change. Wu Zhao was stunned, a little confused. Don't you want to change? After a stick of incense. In the Qianyuan Hall, the ministers gathered. Xu Jingzong and other high-ranking officials of the Secretariat stood in the front row, on both sides. The Empress glanced at everyone and said lightly. The enemy general Nuru Nein, who was captured by Heikai Changji, has been escorted to Luoyang. Qianlong wants to ask us to return Nuru Nein. Quote, what do you think? There was a commotion in the hall. They didn't expect Qianlong to want to exchange Nuru Nein back. Xu Jingzong stroked his beard and pondered. Your Majesty, perhaps we can use this person to ask the Qing Emperor Qianlong for more things and make him bleed. The other officials nodded. Yes, Nuru Nein is a famous general of the Qing dynasty, and Chenjiang will definitely pay a price for him. Yes, it's a waste of food for Nuru Nein to stay here, it's better to exchange for some money. Nuru Nein's family has a certain weight in the Qing dynasty, and should be able to exchange for good conditions. Everyone talked about it. Wu Zhao didn't comment. She thought so at first. But after hearing Yang Yi's thoughts, she changed her mind. She looked at everyone and then landed on Yang Yi. Yang Qing, what do you think? Everyone's eyes gradually fell on Yang Yi. Their attitude towards Yang Yi was quite complicated now. They saw his talent, but when he opened his mouth, he would come up with all kinds of vicious schemes, which really made them, old antiques who were used to reading sage books, unable to stand it. Li Yifu looked at Yang Yi with complicated eyes. Yang Yi had made him look bad in the past 6 months. So much so that even the Empress became more and more indifferent to him. Yang Yi didn't care about the eyes of the crowd at all and smiled. May I ask you, if we return Nuru Nein to Emperor Qianlong, what is the most we can get in exchange? Everyone was stunned and fell into deep thought. Xu Jingzong stroked his beard and pondered. 200,000 taels of silver. 3,000 pieces of silk cloth. Plus 1,000 horses. Yang Yi said seriously, Mr. Xu, do you think that the money is more important, or a general of the enemy country is more important? Xu Jingzong narrowed his eyes. In terms of value, of course, people are more important, but Nuru Nein is not very useful in our hands. The other officials nodded one after another, and they thought so too. Xu Jingzong said again, what's more, the dispute between the two countries has far-reaching consequences. If we give Emperor Qianlong a face at this time and return Nuru Nein to the Qing dynasty under certain conditions, perhaps this war will gradually disappear. After all, war is not a good thing for both countries. Everyone nodded in agreement after hearing this. Xu Jingzong is indeed a court elder, and he has a long-term vision. Yang Yi glanced at everyone and suddenly said, do you think that my great Zhou and Qing can be at peace again? The hall was suddenly quiet, and everyone looked at each other. An official couldn't help but ask, Minister Yang, do you plan to continue fighting with Qing? Now that my great Zhou has won, Perhaps we should first consolidate the territory we have gained. This person is Zhang Zhangji, the Minister of War. Now that Yang Yi has the title of Right Minister of War, Zhang Zhangji is his direct superior. Yang Yi cupped his hands. Minister Zhang, we want to consolidate the territory we just conquered, but the enemy may not be willing to do so. Qianlong is ambitious and deliberately provokes my great Zhou. Now that my great Zhou has slapped him hard and lost face, how can he be willing to stop the war? I guess that maybe Qianlong is mobilizing troops and planning to fight with my great Zhou again. If this Niu Hulu Nechen is returned, wouldn't it encourage the enemy's arrogance? The value of a general who is good at using troops in war is far beyond the comparison of some external objects. After he finished speaking, Zhang Zhangji, the Minister of War, fell into deep thought. A very old man in a purple official robe next to him groaned. Then what does Yang Shilang mean is? Yang Yi glanced at the old man. The old man was an old minister who followed the first emperor of the Great Zhou in the early days of the founding of the country, Wei Yuanzhang, the minister of the Ministry of War. He and Xu Jingzong and others were the mainstays of the Great Zhou Empire. Although Li Yifu is powerful, he was only promoted in recent years. Compared with these senior ministers, he is still less experienced. Yang Yi smiled and said, Duke Wei, I think that since the war has started and the enemy has no intention of giving up, we might as well offend them to the end. Sheng Shuling Wei Yuanzhang was stunned, and his slightly turbid eyes showed astonishment. He pondered, does Yang Shilang mean to kill Niu Hulu Nechen? The hall was suddenly quiet. Everyone took a breath in their hearts. They also thought of this possibility and looked at Yang Yi in shock. He is worthy of being a famous poisoner in the Great Zhou. In this situation, he still wants to discuss the other side. Directly reject Qianlong's proposal and execute the other party's confidant and beloved general. Qianlong must be furious. This is killing people and breaking their hearts. Xu Jingzong touched his beard and smiled bitterly on his skin-covered face. Young people are still brave enough. The others nodded with lingering fear. After all, Qing was a great country. The cavalry of the Jurchens also once dominated the world. Although they were not afraid of the Great Zhou, they did not provoke them. If they could fight, they would fight. If they could make peace, they would make peace. Everything should be based on stability. I didn't expect Yang Yi to provoke Qianlong. Although Yang Yi claimed that Qianlong might find another opportunity to attack the Great Zhou, this was speculation after all. Taking the initiative to provoke was another matter. Everyone in the hall subconsciously looked at the Empress again and found that the Empress was just listening calmly, without any intention of intervening in their topic. Just when everyone was thinking complicatedly and sighing at Yang Yi's courage, Yang Yi blinked and said, Duke Wei, did Lord Shu misunderstand? When did I say I wanted to kill Niu Hulu Nechen? Wei Yuanzhang was stunned, looking at a loss. The old man was also a prodigy who became famous at a young age. He was appreciated by the emperor all the way through the imperial examinations and became the Sheng Shuling. His power was close to that of the prime minister. He had been up and down in the officialdom for decades and had seen countless geniuses and eccentrics. He was very knowledgeable, but now he was really confused by Yang Yi's words. Didn't you say you wanted to offend him to the end? If you don't kill Niu Hulu Nechen, how can you offend Qianlong to the end? Xu Jingzong next to him was also stunned. Not killing Niu Hulu and Nechen. Everyone was also confused. What on earth was Yang Yi talking about? Why couldn't they understand? The corners of Wu Zetian's rosy lips curled up slightly. She was also confused by Yang Yi's words just now, and now she was standing aside and watching the reactions of these ministers, which was quite funny. Shangguan Wan'er on the side blinked her beautiful eyes and looked at Yang Yi with some incomprehension. She thought she was a smart person, but now her head was dizzy and she couldn't even understand what Yang Yi said. The hall was quiet. Wei Yuanzhang pondered. Minister Yang, you said not to kill Niu Hulu and Nechen. Yang Yi nodded slightly. Yes. Zhang Zhangji next to him frowned. Minister Yang, didn't you say you wanted to offend Qianlong to the end? If you don't kill Niu Hulu and Nechen, how can you offend Qianlong? Everyone nodded slightly, looking confused. Zhang Zhangji asked their doubts. Yang Yi curled his lips, revealing his white teeth. Why do you want to kill Niu Hulu Nechen? Not only will we not kill Niuhulu Nechen, but we will also promise Qianlong to return Niuhulu Nechen in exchange for money and property. Ah, Zhang Zhangji looked confused, and Wei Yuanzhang, Xu Jingzong and others were even more stunned. The officials around were dumbfounded. What a bullshit. Didn't you just say that it's not worth it to return it? Li Yifu on the side gritted his teeth and wanted to mock him for being mysterious. However, with the previous experience, he endured it this time. He just mocked Yang Yi fiercely in his heart, and then watched coldly to see what Yang Yi was up to. Xu Jingzong stroked his beard, and a bitter smile appeared on his weathered face. Minister Yang, don't keep us in suspense. What are you planning? Wei Yuanzhang and others nodded one after another. They also saw it now. Yang Yi seemed to have different ideas from them. Yang Yi's face was calm. He met everyone's gaze and said seriously, Mr. Xu, I really didn't keep you in suspense. I've said what I wanted to say. If Niuhulu Nechen is not killed, it will gain certain benefits if he is returned to them, but if he is returned to Qianlong for nothing, it will only allow the enemy to gain another general. So, I have a plan, which can return Niuhulu Nechen to the Qing dynasty and blackmail Qianlong. Single quote. Secondly, he can use Niuhulu Nechen to completely offend Qianlong. Finally, he can also let Niuhulu Nechen return to the Qing dynasty, but Qianlong will never use him again. It is not impossible to kill Niuhulu Nechen with his own hands. Everyone was stunned at first, and then they were shocked and stared at Yang Yi in amazement. This Minister Yang wanted to blackmail Qianlong and kill Niuhulu Nechen with Qianlong's hand. Why does this sound like a fairy tale? Wei Yuanzhang frowned, a little dissatisfied. Minister Yang, I know you have many strategies and you are a meritorious official of my great Zhou. However, what you just said is clearly a fantasy. How can you do it? How can you have both in this world? Qianlong is not a fool. Why would he give you a large sum of money and kill Niuhulu Nechen for you? He originally admired Yang Yi and thought that it was a blessing for the great Zhou that new talents could emerge in the empire. As a result, it seems that this kid is still too old. After gaining some merits, he doesn't know how high the sky is and how deep the earth is. Although Qianlong is arrogant and conceited, he is not a fool. Let alone the emperor of a country, even an ordinary person would not give you a sum of money to exchange for a person and then kill him. Isn't this just treating people as fools? Yes, Duke Wei is right. Although Minister Yang is witty, he is indeed a little outrageous this time. Quote, I think so too. How could Qianlong be the king if even ordinary people would not do such a loss-making business? It shouldn't be. How could Minister Yang make such a mistake? Everyone started to talk, and the hall was a little noisy. Wu Zhao glanced at the noisy crowd, and then looked at Yang Yi, who was in the center of everyone's questioning eyes but remained calm, and couldn't help but sigh. Those who have thunder in their chests but calm faces can be worshipped as generals. This young hero in his 20s already has the momentum of swallowing thousands of miles like a tiger. She coughed lightly. Everyone suddenly quieted down. Her Majesty's voice was calm, without the slightest ripple. Since Mr. Yang has a plan, why not tell us? Everyone's eyes fell on Yang Yi, with different expressions, some questioning, some supporting, and some gloating. Yang Yi had a smile on his lips, and his handsome face was calm even when facing a disaster. He cupped his hands. Before I tell you my plan, I would like to ask you, do you know the Dazhou Bao that has been popular all over the country recently? After he finished speaking, everyone was excited. Dazhou Bao. Of course they know it. In fact, many of them are the main force in subscribing to Dazhou Bao. Wei Yuanzhang frowned and pondered. Dazhou Bao, I have heard a little bit about it. Wang is good. I heard that it records all the recent news on a few pieces of paper, and distributes it nationwide, every 7 days, and the news on it is called news. Quote. Yang Yi clapped his hands and laughed. Mr. Wei is right. This is the newspaper. The sales of one issue of Dazhou Bao in Luoyang is close to 200,000, but in other places it is close to 700,000 or 800,000 copies. It is estimated that the sales of all periodicals issued so far are at least tens of millions. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. It is incredible. A mere newspaper can actually sell such an exaggerated volume. Xu Jingzong, Zhang Zhangji, Wei Yuanzhang and others looked thoughtful when they heard this. What does Yang Yi mention about Dazhou Bao, and what does it have to do with Qianlong? Wei Yuanzhang said in a deep voice. Dazhou Bao is indeed a good business, but it seems irrelevant to what we are discussing. Everyone nodded repeatedly. Yang Yi showed a mysterious smile. Mr. Wei is wrong. The fact that Dazhou Bao can sell so many copies, does it mean that there are millions of people who are potential customers of Dazhou Bao? Wei Yuanzhang nodded subconsciously. Yang Yi continued. In that case, if I use the Dazhou Bao to tell the people of the world that Nuru Nein is in my hands, will everyone believe it? Wei Yuanzhang frowned and said, the news that the great Zhou defeated the Qing dynasty and captured the enemy's main general has long been spread. How can they not believe it when the Dazhou Bao publishes this news? Everyone nodded in agreement. Yang Yi sneered and said, then if I publish in the Dazhou Bao that Nuru Nein was tortured during his captivity in Luoyang, and in order to survive, he revealed some secrets about Qianlong. For example, Qianlong is a lustful emperor who likes to rape other people's wives and daughters, and has a love of men and women, and is bloodthirsty, cruel and inhumane, and also likes the wives of ministers and brothers. Do you think anyone will believe it? The hall suddenly fell silent and fell into a strange silence. Everyone stared at Yang Yi in amazement, gasping for air, and their hair numbed. At this point, they immediately understood the meaning of Yang Yi's plan. This is to use the terrifying influence of Dazhou Bao to throw a basin of dirty water on Qianlong. 3 people make a tiger. A few people spread a rumor as if it were true. What's more, hundreds of thousands of people, or even millions of people. With sales of hundreds of thousands of copies, the scope of this impact cannot be simply estimated. It can be imagined that once those vicious rumors, as Yang Yi said, were spread from Dazhou Bao, there is no need to use definite words, just suspected and possible. It is enough to make those civilians excited. After all, this is the emperor. Who doesn't want to hear the secrets about the emperor? At that time, who will care whether it is true or false? As long as enough people spread it, it will be true. At that time, Qianlong's reputation will be completely ruined. And Nuru Nein, who was rumored to have revealed Qianlong's secret, could he still be reused even if he was released to the Qing dynasty? If Qianlong had a narrow mind, Nuru Nein would have been killed. The best result would be that he would never appear in the court again in his life. With Yang Yi's suggestion, everyone instantly thought of these possible results. They were all horrified and looked at Yang Yi in horror. They were so shocked that their scalps were numb. It's too cruel. This is more than just killing people. It's simply nailing people to the pillar of shame. Using public opinion to destroy a person's reputation alive. There was a dead silence in the hall. Wei Yuanzhang's old face full of ravines was full of shock. He swallowed tremblingly. Nick, this Minister Yang is not very old, but his mind is really cruel. He has never seen such a cruel scheme in his life. Xu Jingzong, Zhang Zhangji and others were also stunned. Did they really see the king of hell? Put yourself in his shoes. If they were accused of having a love affair with a man and liking to rape other people's wives and daughters, and if this rumor was seen by hundreds of thousands or even millions of people, what would be the consequences? Xu Jingzong, Zhang Zhangji and others shuddered, looked at each other, and smiled bitterly. If this were the case, they would probably just go home and hang themselves on a beam. A person lives on his face. Such a rumor would be a stain that could never be erased. Li Yifu, who was standing next to him, swallowed his saliva. This guy was so vicious. Shangguan Wan'er was also dumbfounded. She thought that Yang Yi's plan might be a bit vicious. But she didn't expect it to be so cruel. This was using the gossip of the whole world to curse Qianlong to death. Everyone in the palace was stunned. Only Her Majesty the Empress was the calmest. 100 But even though she had known Yang Yi's plan in advance, she was still quite emotional at this time. This plan is really vicious. The hall was quite quiet. Yang Yi saw the shocked look on everyone's face and couldn't help but smile. This plan is only effective against Qianlong. After all, he is the emperor. Only the identity of the emperor can attract countless people to pry into his private life. Once some secrets are exposed, even if they are false, people will be happy to spread them. If you spread them too much, they will naturally become true. And Qianlong's reputation as a playboy is known to the whole country. If it were someone else, he wouldn't have such a big influence. It's true that the Qing dynasty was defeated, it's true that Nuru Nein was captured, and it's true that Qianlong was romantic, so if we planted a small rumor, everyone would take it seriously. If 9 out of 10 sentences are true, then whether the 10th sentence is a lie or not, everyone will take it seriously. In this case, after Nuru Nein is redeemed, even if Qianlong doesn't kill him, he will commit suicide. Because he has no way to defend himself. This crime is falsely accused. Quote, everyone looked at Yang Yi, who was smiling and talking freely, and their scalps tingled and their hair stood up. It was as if a bone-chilling chill rushed straight up from the soles of their feet to the top of their heads. It was terrible. It was simply cruel to the extreme. Using all favorable conditions and time, he fabricated a false rumor, and then took advantage of the people's curiosity about the Supreme Emperor's private affairs, and destroyed a person's reputation with gossip, and forced another person to commit suicide. This is the real strategy in the tent, and the victory is thousands of miles away. Even Yang Yi didn't even have to leave Luoyang to kill Nuru Nein, and put a stain on Qianlong that could never be erased. It is conceivable that Qianlong would be as calm as before when facing his sister-in-law and his ministers. Can those people still act as if nothing happened when they saw Qianlong? Once suspicion arises, the crime has been established. The hall was quiet for a long time. Wei Yuanzhang sighed and said slowly, Minister Yang is far-sighted, and I misunderstood. Yang Yi smiled. Mr. Wei, it's also for the great Zhou. Xu Jingzong next to him pondered. Then now we. Yang Yi raised the corner of his mouth, revealing his white teeth, and said without hesitation. Of course, we should discuss how to bite Qianlong hard and suck his blood. Everyone was frightened for no reason. Although they knew it was done this way, it always felt like the coming of the living king of hell when it came out of Yang Yi's mouth. This kid is so vicious. Half a day later, Shuyu Palace. Reporting the news that Nuru Nein was captured and taken to Luoyang. Wu Mingyu was a little confused. Yang Yi nodded slightly. The news was transmitted too slowly. Until now, there are still many people who don't know that the enemy's main general is called Nuru Nein. They don't even know that Nuru Nein was captured and taken to Luoyang. Wu Mingyu frowned. But why should the people know that Nuru Nein is in Luoyang? The cute look of Her Royal Highness made Yang Yi want to poke Wu Mingyu's forehead with his finger. He smiled and said, didn't I promise Her Royal Highness to double the sales of Dazhou Bao? Quote, this Nuru Nein is an opportunity. Wu Mingyu still looked confused. Yang Yi didn't mean to explain at all, so he continued. Princess, just listen to me. This is what His Majesty wants. Wu Mingyu, you still use your sister to put pressure on her. This guy. Wu Mingyu snorted. If you don't want to say it, then don't say it. Humph. The next day, Wu Mingyu followed Yang Yi's instructions and, regardless of the cost, made a big fuss about the fact that Nuru Nein had been captured and taken to Luoyang. For a while, the news that the Qing dynasty was defeated and the enemy commander was captured and taken to Luoyang was rampant. Many people were quite proud and began to pay attention. Later, many news about Nuru Nein were dug out. Such news as this person is a descendant of the Qing nobles, a trusted general of Qianlong, and a close relationship with Qianlong were all over the sky. Of course, Yang Yi helped to stir up the flames. But more of it was the guidance of public opinion. When the people all focused their attention on one place, the power would be very terrible. Luoyang has the Luo River, which is convenient for water transportation. At the same time, as the world's top prosperous city, many merchants from various countries came here to do business. Nowadays, Luoyang can be seen almost everywhere discussing Nuru Nein. Many merchants brought the news that the Qing dynasty and Zhou dynasty fought, the Qing dynasty was defeated, and Nuru Nein was captured and taken to Luoyang. At this moment, the Dazhou Bao was also printed in large quantities. 10 days later, Jinluan Palace. Bang! A piece of fine mutton fat white jade cup fell to the ground and smashed to pieces. Assholes, just assholes. Qianlong's roar echoed in the hall. Fucha Fuang, Nuru Alagan and other ministers beside him were silent. Is his Nein made of gold? Qianlong's eyes were red with anger. This Zhou kingdom actually asked me for 200,000 pieces of silk, 300,000 taels of silver, and 3,000 horses. Assholes, are they really the ones who are being taken advantage of? Do these greedy Zhou people really think I will obey them? His chest was heaving with anger, like a bellows, making a whirring sound, his eyes were red, like a demon, and the whole person was much more haggard than before. The hall was quiet for a while. Only Qianlong's panting voice could be heard. He said in a hoarse voice, "Tell the envoy of Zhou that this price is simply impossible. I can't spend such a huge price to exchange for a defeated general." Fu Cha, Fu Heng and others said respectfully, "Yes, Your Majesty." Da Ming, Biaoer, this is the Da Zhou news, made by Yang Yi. Zhu Yuanzhang took a newspaper and put it in front of Zhu Biao. We heard that Zhou and Qing are negotiating now. Qianlong wants to exchange for Niu Hulu Nechen. Yang Yi probably won't let go easily. Let me test you. What do you think the final result will be? Zhu Biao fell into deep thought. Zhu Yuanzhang was not in a hurry. He drank a sip of tea and waited patiently for his son to think. After a while, Zhu Biao tried to probe. Given Yang Yi's character, he probably won't return Niu Hulu Nechen alive to Qianlong, but he can't break his promise openly. I guess with his methods, after getting the ransom, he will beat Niu Hulu Nechen half to death, or force poison into him, and wait until Niu Hulu Nechen arrives in Qingguohou, he will die of his injuries. Zhu Yuanzhang touched his beard, and a smile appeared on his angular face. As expected of our son, Biaoer, you and our hero have similar views. Looking at Yang Yi's strategies, they are all vicious and cruel. How could such a poisonous man send Niu Hulu Nechen back like this? Let's wait and see. Yang Yi will definitely do something. Maybe he will poison Niu Hulu Nechen, as Biaoer said. Tang Dynasty. Niu Hulu Nechen should be sent back intact. Li Shimin said firmly, although Yang Yi's methods are cruel, the means of negotiation between the two countries will never use such despicable means as poisoning, otherwise how will the other countries view the Great Zhou in the future? Changsun Wuji pondered and said, I think Your Majesty is right. Quote. Fang Xuanling shook his head and said, I think Your Majesty is wrong. They captured Niu Hulu Nechen. With Yang Yi's revengeful and blood-sucking character, how could he let a complete Niu Hulu Nechen return to Qing and become his enemy again? Du Ruhui fell into deep thought. Brother Xuanling, what you said makes sense, but Your Majesty also seems to make sense. Could it be that Yang Yi dared to play such a trick as poisoning in such a negotiation between the two countries? The ministers in the hall had a very heated discussion. Li Shimin was a little helpless. Since they had repeatedly failed to guess Yang Yi's thoughts before, they were now competing with Yang Yi. After all, they were all counselors of the most powerful empire. They couldn't even guess the thoughts of a young man. How could they save their face? Li Shimin coughed lightly. Everyone, stop arguing. Let's not talk about the negotiations between Qing and Zhou. Quote. Recently, Zhou State has launched a new thing called Da Zhou Bao. Do you all know about it? Everyone looked at each other in surprise. Changsun Wuji smiled bitterly. Your Majesty, how could you not know? This, Da Zhou Bao, is extremely popular and well received. I heard that someone in Chang'an bought Da Zhou Bao at a high price. Many people in Chang'an even went to Luoyang to buy Da Zhou Bao because of the profit and then resold it to local people. Fang Xuanling stroked his beard. I also saw Da Zhou Bao from my son a few days ago. The newspaper is really interesting. Li Shimin rubbed his eyebrows. Chongla, Gao Yang is obsessed with this newspaper all day long. I accidentally saw it and took it to have a look. I found it really interesting, and the news recorded on it is also very interesting. I think our Tang dynasty can also have a Da Tang newspaper. Changsun Wuji frowned. It's not enough to rely on news alone. We also need to rely on fascinating vernacular novels such as Dream of the Red Chamber and Romance of the West Chamber. Our Tang dynasty may not be able to do better than the Great Zhou dynasty. Li Shimin was helpless. He was of course clear about the quality of Dream of the Red Chamber and Romance of the West Chamber. It's not so easy to imitate others. Qin dynasty. Imperial Palace. What's going on? Where is the Great Zhou daily I ordered? Ying Yinmin looked at her maid's empty hands with a blank face. The maid smiled bitterly and said, His Majesty took it away, saying that he would return it to the princess after reading it. Ying Yinmin. Zongtai Palace. Look at this great Zhou daily, which is widely publicizing that Niuhulu Nechin was captured and taken to Luoyang. I always feel that it is a bit strange. Quote, Ying Zheng's cold voice sounded. Li Si, Feng Quji, Wang and others looked at each other. During this period, they also found that His Majesty the Emperor was very concerned about this poisonous scholar of Zhou. Wang Wan subconsciously said, Zhou defeated Qing, and it seems that there is nothing wrong with showing off. Ying Zheng narrowed his eyes. He thought so at first, but for some reason, he always felt that something was wrong. He said slowly, Qianlong traded prisoners of war with the Zhou people, but the Zhou people were mainly promoting how close the relationship between Niuhulu Nechin and Qianlong was. This is wrong and very strange. Quote, the ministers were stunned and frowned. Li Si pondered. Your Majesty, do you think that the negotiations between the two countries will not go smoothly? Ying Zheng fell into deep thought. If it was someone else, there should be no problem. But if Yang Yi intervenes, this matter may not be so simple in the end. I think he should do something to Niuhulu Nechin. Li Si narrowed his eyes. Release Niuhulu Nechin back to Qing, and then kill him halfway. Ying Zheng had no expression on his face. Maybe, I think Yang Yi should use such a low-level trick. This made Li Si embarrassed. Feng Quji, Wang Wan and others looked at each other. Ying Zheng thought for a moment and shook his head. I know he won't let Niuhulu Nechin go back easily, but he won't kill him personally. But I can't think of what kind of strategy can release Niuhulu Nechin and prevent Niuhulu Nechin from threatening Zhou, and even defraud Qianlong of money. Is there really such a win-win strategy? The last sentence seemed to be a question, but it was actually a negative sentence. Feng Quji pondered and said, Your Majesty, maybe Yang Yi really didn't think so much. It's just that you overestimated him. Ying Zheng said lightly, maybe. Great Zhou, 200,000 rolls of silk, 300,000 taels of silver, and 3,000 horses are unacceptable. Then bring out our original conditions, 100,000 rolls of silk, 150,000 taels of silver, and 1,000 horses, and tell Qianlong that if it doesn't work, then forget about wanting his beloved general. Yang Yi curled his lips. Xu Jingzong and others beside him smiled bitterly and shook their heads. This kid is too sinister. Originally, this was the condition they decided on at the beginning. As a result, when Yang Yi told the other envoy, he deliberately raised the price temporarily, under the pretext of raising the other party's bottom line first. In this way, Qianlong could not accept the lion's opening condition, and would inevitably accept the 100,000 rolls of silk, 150,000 taels of silver, and 1,000 horses they had agreed on. Although it was a bit sinister, it must be said that it really worked. Wu Jiao raised her beautiful eyebrows slightly, she leaned back on the chair, and pondered. How is Niuhulu Nechin now? Yang Yi smiled and said, this old guy is now locked up in prison all day and has nothing to do with the outside world. The Great Weekly has published 2 issues in a row about his relationship with Qianlong, detailed introduction to his back. He sighed with a hint of joking. Recently, not to mention my great Zhou, even the surrounding Qin, Tang and other countries all know him. He is the most popular person in the Qing dynasty. Now even those poor scholars who write scripts for a living have begun to take advantage of his popularity. Just wait for Qianlong to pay, and the Great Weekly will start to expose the dirty things he did for Qianlong and their secrets of bullying men and women. By then, the whole world will know that he and Qianlong are not good people. Xu Jingzong, Wei Yuanzhong, Zhang Zhangji and others felt their scalps tingling and took a breath secretly. Fortunately, Yang Yi is a minister of the Great Zhou. If this happened in an enemy country, they would be the ones who would be disgraced now. People live by their reputations, and it is hard for them to imagine how Qianlong would live with such a thick face in the face of all the criticisms. Her Majesty sighed silently. Fortunately, she had a good eye for people. Not to mention Wei Yuanzhong and the others, even she herself felt a little horrified when she heard Yang Yi's words. 3 days later, Qing Dynasty. Your Majesty, the Zhou Kingdom has an urgent report. Fucha Fuang pondered, 100,000 pieces of silk, 150,000 taels of silver, and 1,000 horses. They said this is their bottom line. If they don't agree, then there is no need to talk about it. Qianlong's eye sockets were sunken, and his bloodshot eyes stared straight at Fucha Fuang, gritting his teeth. Promise them. These days, he has been tortured enough. It is really shameless to deal with this group of Zhou people. Fucha Fuang said respectfully. Yes, Your Majesty. Single quote. Qianlong closed his eyes. Tell them to release Nechin as soon as possible. I will send someone to deliver all the things now. He was not worried that Yang Yi and others would take the money but not release them. If they really went back on their word, the reputation of Zhou would be ruined, and it would be a self-defeating move from other countries. Fucha Fuang nodded slightly. Yes, Your Majesty. 10 days later. Minister Yang, this is the promise of my emperor. Please release General Nechin as soon as possible. A man wearing a top hat and a brocade robe said in a deep voice. Yang Yi glanced behind the Qing official. A huge box was placed on the car, and the Zhou official next to him went to check and nodded to him. It was indeed 100,000 pieces of silk and 150,000 taels of silver. And the 1,000 horses had been inspected and put in the stable. Yang Yi nodded with satisfaction. He didn't expect that Niu Hulu Nechin was quite valuable. He smiled and said, Don't worry, I will never break my promise. I will have someone send Niu Hulu Nechin here later. After sending away the Qing envoy, Yang Yi turned around and went back to report to the Empress. Qianyuan Palace. Your Majesty, the ransom of the Qing has been delivered. I have sent Niu Hulu Nechin to the Qing envoy. They will leave my Taikong in half a day. Yang Yi said seriously. Wu Zhao's slender white fingers tapped the table lightly, and a smile appeared on her cold and noble face. Very good. I look forward to tomorrow's Dazhou Bao. Are you ready? Yang Yi cupped his hands. Your Majesty, I have already given instructions to the newspaper office. Everything is ready, except for the east wind. Night fell. The newspaper office was still brightly lit. The yard where newspapers were printed was bustling with people. Many workers were busy printing the new issue of Dazhou Bao. Although enough was prepared, Yang Yi always felt it was not enough, so the newspaper office had been working all night these days. Wu Mingyu on the side had dark circles under her eyes, a little dissatisfied, and pouted her rosy lips. I have done all the work, and you are leaving now. Yang Yi put his hands in his sleeves and said with a smile. Your Highness, the smart and beautiful princess, is the only one who can take care of the newspaper office. Quote. Wouldn't it be a hindrance for your Highness to be here? These two sentences made Wu Mingyu very happy. She waved her hand and pretended to be calm. Hee, I am also doing this for my sister and for the great Zhou. But is it really okay for you to do this? The news reports the real news. You made up all these negative things about Qianlong. Yang Yi shook his head. This princess is not black-bellied enough. When it comes to politics, there is no such thing as true or false. He said with a smile. Your Highness, don't you know that Qianlong is a dissolute person? It is said that every time he went on a private visit, as long as he saw a beautiful woman, he would pull her over to sleep with her, regardless of whether she had a husband or not. Quote. I heard that he has more children among the common people than those in the palace. For such a lustful person, exposing his true face is also for the women who have been bullied by him to vent their anger. To fight for the benefit of the people and to expose the darkness for the weak, isn't this the purpose of our Dazhou Bao? Quote. You said I made it up, but if he is an upright and flawless person, will it be useful for me to make it up? His words made Wu Mingyu dizzy. Wu Mingyu pursed her lips, and a trace of disgust appeared in her eyes. It seems so. People who like to rape other people's wives and daughters should die. 2. She suddenly glanced at Yang Yi. You are a pervert who likes to look at breasts. What qualifications do you have to say that others are perverted? Yang Yi said righteously. Your Highness, you have a serious misunderstanding of me. In fact, I am just fulfilling my mother's expectations of me. Ah, Wu Mingyu was confused. What does your pervertedness have to do with your parents' expectations of you? Yang Yi looked serious. My parents hope that I can become an outstanding person. And obviously, I have completed 4/5 of it. I have become a very lustful person. Okay, this fool can really excuse himself. She glared at Yang Yi and said angrily. Then you shouldn't always stare at my breasts. Yang Yi sighed. Okay, then I'll look at my legs next time. Wu Mingyu. The next day, newsboys in military green uniforms were selling newspapers in the streets with a thick stack of Dazhou Bao. Extra, Extra, the secret history of the love affairs of Emperor Qianlong of the Qing dynasty is revealed. Shocked, the emperor of the Qing dynasty actually did this to his sister-in-law. Shameless. Qianlong's 10 dirty black materials. Various epoch-making shocking headlines came out of the childish voice of the newsboy, which immediately attracted the attention of countless people. In any era, the supreme emperor always represents mystery, dignity, and once ordinary things are associated with the emperor, they become different. Many people have never seen the emperor in their lives. The emperor's privacy has a fatal attraction for ordinary people. That kid, give me one. I want two too. Give me 10. The people around immediately surrounded them and divided up all the newspapers. The rest of the people who didn't get them were envious. This is the emperor's privacy. The newspaper next to them stood aside and read it, and was amazed, which made the people around them feel like they were scratched by a cat. Such scenes can be seen everywhere in Luoyang. In just half a day, the 500,000 copies of newspapers carefully prepared by Wu Mingyu were all sold out. Of course, it was not only the people of Luoyang who bought it. More of them were those opportunistic businessmen. These businessmen have extremely keen sense of smell. Once they realized that this issue of Dazhou Bao was likely to sell unprecedented sales, they came to buy it. After all, this is about the emperor's privacy. These people bought tens of thousands of copies at a time. If Wu Mingyu hadn't prepared millions of newspapers, it's estimated that there wouldn't be enough to sell. In just 3 days, this issue of Dazhou Bao was sold all over the country at full speed. And those merchants even took Dazhou Bao to other countries and sold it at high prices. 5 days later, in the whole Luoyang, everyone knew that there was an Emperor Qianlong in the Qing dynasty, who liked to rape other people's wives and daughters, commit adultery with his sister-in-law, and cuckold his ministers. He was evil and cruel. The streets and alleys were full of discussions about Qianlong. Whether eating or drinking, the first sentence when meeting is, "Have you heard of Qianlong?" What? You haven't heard of Qianlong? Then you are too out of date. Qing dynasty. Jinluan Palace. Your Majesty, Fu Cha Fuang said respectfully, General Nechen is back. Qianlong raised his eyebrows, and a smile appeared on his slightly thin face. Okay, it's good to be back. Let him come to see me. Quote. After so many days of bad news, he was exhausted, and finally there was some good news. Even if he paid a price to get back Niu Hulu Nechen. But in his opinion, a general, let alone his trusted and beloved general, could not compare with those material things. Besides, he was buying horse bones with 1,000 gold. The purpose was to tell those officials that as long as they were loyal to me, even if you were captured by the enemy, I would pay a price to redeem you and would not give up on you. This was Qianlong's little thought. After all, there is no fool who can be an emperor. Fu Cha Fu Heng said respectfully, I have already notified General Nechen, and General Nechen should be rushing to the palace now. Quote. His words had just fallen. KKK. A burst of hurried and chaotic footsteps sounded. It was enough to show that the visitor was extremely panicked. Quote. Quote. The figure of Ortai appeared. This old minister has always given people the impression of being mature and steady, but at this moment he was in a panic and had no manners at all. Qianlong was stunned and had a bad premonition in his heart. The last time Ortai was so flustered was when his father died. For so many years, he had hardly seen Ortai so flustered. Fucha Fuang beside him also narrowed his eyes and became a little nervous. Recently, the Qing dynasty has encountered a lot of troubles. Is there something wrong again? Ortai ran to Qianlong breathlessly, his old face full of wrinkles was full of anxiety. Your Majesty, something big has happened. Qianlong's heart sank. Ortai, what's wrong? Ortai's gray eyebrows were slightly raised, and his slightly turbid eyes looked at Qianlong in a complicated way. He trembled and handed a newspaper in his arms to Qianlong. Your Majesty, please look, this is the new Dazhou Bao, published by the Zhou people. Dazhou Bao. Qianlong and Fucha Fuang were both stunned. They had also heard a little about the Dazhou Bao, made by the Zhou people. This thing is also very popular in the Qing dynasty. Even the ladies in the harem collected the Dazhou Bao. So they were not unfamiliar with the Dazhou Bao. However, Before this, they did not pay much attention to the Dazhou Bao. Now seeing Ortai's nervous look, Qianlong and Fucha Fuang were a little puzzled. How could a mere copy of the Dazhou Bao make this old minister lose his composure like this? Qianlong frowned slightly, took the Dazhou Bao, just glanced at it, and his face suddenly changed. He said angrily, "Asshole, this is simply nonsense." Fucha Fuang next to him secretly glanced at it, his eyes widened, and he took a breath of cold air. I saw that the entire page of the newspaper was full of articles about Qianlong. The biggest headline among them is, "The latest revelations of Qianlong's beloved general Nuru Nein, the story that the emperor and his sister-in-law have to tell." As for other subheadings, there are many explosive texts such as, "Prince Rui lost his beloved wife, Qianlong stayed overnight with the princess, the secret history of Qianlong and the crown princess, etc." Let alone Qianlong, even if Zhangjiang Fuang was caught, he would be almost exposed. This is simply nonsense. Although Qianlong slept with many women, he really didn't mess with the women around him. It is even more impossible for him to have an accident with his sister-in-law, the princess of the Iron Hat King, and his own daughter-in-law. This is pure slander. Also, what the hell did Nuru Nein reveal? Just when Fucha Fuang's brain was a little out of control, Qianlong next to him shouted angrily, "Senkin, asshole!" His roar echoed in the hall. Fucha Fuang was startled, came back to his senses, and looked at Qianlong. The emperor's eyes widened, bloodshot, his whole face was inflated, full of reddish brown, veins on his forehead were exposed, and he clutched the newspaper tightly with both hands, as if he was going to tear it up the next moment. "Nonsense, when did I do these things?" Qianlong was so angry that he almost exploded, his chest rose and fell violently. "I have not met Prince Rui's concubine a few times, I was wronged, this Dazhou Bao is just nonsense." Crazy. He was almost crazy. This is really too much. In this life, he has never been splashed with such dirty water. Qianlong was furious. Such vicious slander is simply impossible to guard against. Ortai next to him had an ugly face. "Your Majesty, according to rumors, this issue of Zhou's Dazhou Bao has sold millions of copies. In the past half-month, excluding those merchants who hoarded goods, at least hundreds of thousands of people have read it. If this matter is allowed to ferment, when everyone knows about it, I'm afraid the rumor will come true." Qianlong's eyes widened, he covered his chest, and his eyes were black. He never expected that Zhou's Dazhou Bao would sell so well. This is a big dirty water thrown on him. His breathing became a little rapid. Rumors stop at wise men. I don't believe that this Dazhou Bao will spread rumors like this, and people all over the world will believe it. Ortai said bitterly. But Nianchen was really captured by Zhou. Dazhou Bao said that he was afraid of death, so he revealed your secret. The previous issues of the newspaper reported in detail the relationship between Nianchen and you. Now it suddenly broke out that he said it. Even the smartest people will be half believing and half doubting at this time, let alone those ordinary people who believe everything they hear. Qianlong's eyes went dark, his head buzzed, as if he was hit hard by a sledgehammer. He couldn't help but take a few steps back and almost fainted. He reacted at this time. If the Dazhou Bao had not used the captured Nianchen as evidence, no one might believe it. However, at this time, everyone knew that his beloved General Nianchen was captured in Dazhou. At this time, if the rumors from Dazhou involved Nianchen again, most of the brainless people would probably believe it. I seem to have been trapped. Qianlong covered his chest, he was so suffocated that he almost exploded. This should be a trap set by the Zhou people. Ortai, Fucha Fuang smiled bitterly. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that it was a frame up by the Zhou kingdom. But what if they knew? The Dazhou Bao had been issued, provoking the world's gossip. The emperor has always been high and mighty. But human nature is despicable. When people hear about the scandals of people who are more powerful than themselves, most of them would rather take it seriously. The Zhou people took advantage of the meanness of human nature to set up a trap, and took advantage of the fact that Nianchen was captured to increase the credibility of the rumor. Their intentions were so sinister and vicious that it frightened the prisoners. Without extremely high insight into people's hearts, such a vicious plot could not be set up. Too cruel. This is to ruin the reputation of their emperor. At this moment, a eunuch hurried in. Your Majesty, Lord Nechen is here. When Qianlong heard this, his face turned pale. Get him out. I don't want to see him. Even he couldn't figure out what Nianchen had revealed during his captivity, let alone the people. This Nianchen is really good at making trouble. The next day, Dazhou Bao completely swept the capital of the Qing dynasty. Even countless Qing people began to discuss whether their emperor had done these things. Because Qianlong's reputation has always been romantic. 907. Therefore, most people really think that what the newspaper said is possible. In the capital, a luxurious mansion. Niu Hulu Nianchen looked at the Dazhou Bao in his hand, his eyes red with anger. Slander, this is slander. He now understands why Qianlong didn't see him yesterday. Anyone who sees this will be angry. No, I want to go to the palace to meet the emperor. Quote. Niu Hulu Nechen crumpled the Dazhou Bao in his hand. He pushed open the door and walked out of the yard. The servants passing by the mansion saluted him one after another, but their eyes were a little strange. Niu Hulu Nechen certainly noticed the eyes of these people, and he felt even more aggrieved. He couldn't clear himself even if he jumped into the Yellow River. It was so unfair. He was about to leave the mansion. A eunuch suddenly walked in at the door. Niu Hulu Nechen knew this eunuch. This eunuch was Hai Gonggong, the eunuch who was close to Qianlong. Hai Gonggong. Niu Hulu Nechen was surprised. Why are you here? Did the emperor ask you to summon me to the palace? Eunuch Hai's cold eyes turned, and his pale face looked like he had been dead for several days. His gloomy voice sounded, General Nechen, I'm not here to summon you to the palace. I'm here to pass on the emperor's message. From today on, Niu Hulu Nechen will no longer hold any official position and will not be allowed to enter the palace again. What? Niu Hulu Nechen was shocked. Eunuch Hai, I am wrong. Please speak to the emperor for me. I am really wrong. That newspaper is pure nonsense. I have never said anything sorry to Hu Shang. Eunuch Hai smiled sinisterly. General Nechen, is it still meaningful to say this now? You were captured and taken to Luoyang. It doesn't matter whether you say it or not. Niu Hulu Nechen's head buzzed. He opened his mouth wide, his face turned pale, his body trembled, and he almost fainted. If you want to accuse someone of a crime, you can always find a pretext. You don't need to have really done it. You just need to have the ability to do it. This crime is false. Half a day later, Niu Hulu Nechen hanged himself in the room. This news soon reached Qianlong's ears. In the palace, Qianlong said coldly, why didn't this useless waste die on the battlefield? Fucha Fuang and others beside him were silent. Now Qianlong hated Niu Hulu Nechen very much. If Niu Hulu Nechen had not failed and been captured, the enemy would not have thought of such a bad trick. Qianlong's life was not easy these 2 days. Although no one dared to talk about this in front of Qianlong, everyone was suspicious. After all, the emperor's romantic reputation was known to everyone. Even the Empress Dowager called Qianlong over to inquire about this matter. Qianlong was very upset. After the news of Niu Hulu Nechen's hanging reached Dazhou. In the palace, Wei Yuanzhong, Zhang Zhangji, Xu Jingzong and others all looked at Yang Yi in shock. They were shocked. It's amazing. Every step of the enemy was exactly what Yang Yi expected. Yang Yi had predicted that Niu Hulu Nechen would die, and now it's true. What a terrible insight. It's so terrifying. Everyone admired Yang Yi. Even Wu Zhao couldn't help but praise him at this time. What a vicious plan that kills 3 birds with 1 stone. It cheated Qianlong of his money, killed someone with a borrowed knife, and ruined Qianlong's reputation. Yang Qing, you are really a top strategist. This time, my great Zhou made a lot of money. Everyone nodded. Isn't it a big profit? Not only did he get the money, but he also killed Niu Hulu Nechen and damaged Qianlong's reputation. Too cruel. They couldn't help but look at Yang Yi in awe. It was this young man who was only 20 years old who made Qianlong so embarrassed. He is really an unparalleled national hero. Yang Yi touched his chin. Your Majesty, Niu Hulu Nechen is dead, and he has helped us again. Quote. Everyone was stunned, some were puzzled. Wu Zhao also had some questions. What do you mean? Yang Yi clapped his hands and laughed. Now the rumors about Qianlong are getting more and more intense, and at this time, one of the protagonists, Nuru Nein, committed suicide at home. So, did he really commit suicide? Did he commit suicide out of fear of crime, or was he forced to commit suicide? If he committed suicide out of fear of crime, what crime was it because of it? Who ordered him to commit suicide? Could it be because he exposed Qianlong's black material, so he was killed by Qianlong in anger? Nuru Nein's death can just push this rumor to the forefront again. We will lead the death of Nuru Nein to Qianlong. As for what the people will think next, it has nothing to do with us. His death can further prove the authenticity of the rumor. Silence. The palace was silent. Everyone's scalp was numb and they were stunned. Even the death of Nuru Nein can be hyped up again. This Yang Yi is really vicious. This is to squeeze the value of Nuru Nein to the end. It can be imagined that when the people know that Nuru Nein is dead, they will 100% think that it was Qianlong who did it. If you are not guilty, why do you want to kill Nuru Nein? The people will definitely have this question. At that time, the rumor will not be a rumor, but a confirmation. Wei Yuanzhang gulped and swallowed his saliva. This is called Yang Yi. Yi's juniors are really too vicious. Who can handle this? Xu Jingzong, Zhang Zhangji and others were also horrified. I was very glad. Fortunately, this guy is a teammate. Wu Zai's rosy lips opened slightly, and she looked at Yang Yi in a daze. Even with her calm state of mind, she couldn't help but break her defense at this time. This minister's methods are really cruel. Even the dead are pulled out and squeezed out again. She pursed her lips for a long time, then slowly said, "I'll leave this to you." The next day, the Dazhou Bao was temporarily added, as expected. The death of Nuru Nein once again ignited the rumors about Qianlong, which had been somewhat weakened. This question popped up in everyone's mind. If these rumors were false, why did Nuru Nein die? It is obvious that Qianlong was guilty. So, the rumors are not rumors, but facts. For a while, all the people who were eating melons were crazy. The emperor's true privacy was exposed. This is the first time in history. Especially when Qianlong was angry and killed Nuru Nein, they were even more excited. Obviously, Qianlong was furious. A supreme emperor was so ashamed that he showed such an ugly appearance. Countless people were all excited to eat melons. Even the people of the Qing dynasty believed it completely at this time. Their emperor really did these dirty things. Qing dynasty. The Golden Palace. How dare you? Qianlong overturned the table in front of him, his eyes red as if he wanted to kill someone. This Zhou people are just talking nonsense. It was obviously Nuru Nein who committed suicide. What does it have to do with me? This Nuru Nein is really incapable of doing anything but causing trouble. He was going to go crazy. Originally, because of the rumors, he planned to deal with Nuru Nein coldly for a while. Unexpectedly, Nuru Nein committed suicide directly. It would be fine if he committed suicide, but these Zhou people took advantage of Nuru Nein's death and pushed him to the forefront again. That's good. Those rumors were completely framed on him. Qianlong was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. He covered his chest, and his face turned unhealthy iron blue. During this period, he was very frustrated. Fuang, have you found out who is behind the plot against Lian? Qianlong roared. Fucha Fuang swallowed his saliva. We have found some clues, and this matter seems to be related to Yang Yi. Yang Yi. Qianlong's eyes widened instantly. It's him again. He roared. I swear I won't be a human being if I don't kill him. Puff. Qianlong spat out a mouthful of blood, his eyes went black, and he fainted. Your Majesty. The people around him exclaimed. Ming Dynasty. Function Hall. We guessed wrong. Zhu Yuanzhang sighed. Zhu Biao looked at the newspaper in front of him. The title on it read, Shock, Qianlong's favorite general suspected of suicide. Zhu Biao clenched his fists, and there was still shock in his eyes. What? Nuru Nein would actually die in this way. Borrowing a knife to kill someone, this Yang Yi's strategy is so superb. This man's strategy is really terrible. His eyes were always fixed on the newspaper in front of him, his hair stood up, and a chill went straight from the soles of his feet to his heart. It's terrible. Unlike those common people, he and his father had been watching Yang Yi's actions for a long time, and even speculated on the strategies Yang Yi might adopt. At that time, they thought Yang Yi might poison him. But now it seems that they are wrong. This poisoner of the Great Zhou used a more clever poisonous scheme to kill people invisibly. It's so cruel. Zhu Yuanzhang's vicissitudes of life could not hide the shock. He said in a deep voice, "This situation is closely linked. Without Niu Hulu Nechin, there would be no beginning of this situation. From the capture of Niu Hulu Nechin to his suicide, everything was under the control of Yang Yi until Niu Hulu Nechin died. Qianlong was completely stained by rumors. He could not wash away these stains." Zhu Yuanzhang narrowed his eyes and praised. "This man is truly a unique strategist in the world. What a powerful and vicious plan. We underestimated him. We thought he would poison us. Now it seems that our ideas were too naive. This Yang Shilang is the real strategist. What a good way to kill someone with a borrowed knife." He used words to create a rift between Qianlong and Niu Hulu Nechin, and eventually Niu Hulu Nechin was killed. Such a genius is not from our Ming dynasty. What a pity. Both father and son are not as good as him. Zhu Biao was dumbfounded. Father. He didn't expect his arrogant father to have such a high opinion of Yang Yi. Tang dynasty. Taiji Hall. Wrong, all wrong. Li Shimon's face was complicated and shocked. I didn't expect that all of us guessed wrong. Yang Yi actually adopted a strategy that we could not even think of to kill Niu Hulu Nechin, and cheated Qianlong of a large sum of money, and nailed Qianlong to the pillar of shame of rumors. Changsun Wuji, Fang Xuanling and others were dumbfounded, and their scalps were numb with shock. They claimed to be the think tank of the Tang dynasty. The 24 ministers of Lingan Pavilion are famous all over the world. However, they couldn't even guess Yang Yi's strategy. It's too embarrassing. Fang Xuanling took a deep breath, and his eyes showed shock. Use public opinion, don't leave Luoyang, invite people from all over the world to join the game, force Niu Hulu Nechin to death, and cheat Qianlong to death. Is this boy a sage who knows everything by nature? He is only 20 years old. Du Ruhui smiled bitterly. The most terrifying thing is that every step taken by Niu Hulu Nechin has become his strategy to put pressure on Qianlong. It is unheard of that he can see through people's hearts and play with them to perfection. I am not as good as him. Changsun Wuji sighed and was shocked. At the age of only 20, he has such a terrible strategy. We old guys are really old. The others were silent. If such a terrible person were to face them, everyone couldn't help but feel cold in their hearts. This person's strategy is too cruel. Not only to kill people, but also to destroy their hearts. Li Shimon rubbed his eyebrows, feeling heavy in his heart. Yang Yi, a terrible poisonous scholar who doesn't play by the rules, is really frightening. Even though he has been on the battlefield for a long time, he was frightened by Yang Yi's vicious strategy. Dakan, Zongtai Palace. Is there really a win-win strategy? Ying Zheng said softly. He seemed to be talking to himself in response to his previous questions. Before Niu Hulu Nechin was released back to the Qing dynasty, he had carefully deduced various possibilities. The final conclusion was that there was no way to extort money from Qianlong and prevent Niu Hulu Nechin from posing a threat to the Great Zhou. But, it has been less than a month, and the situation has reversed several times and changed rapidly. Qianlong lost a lot of money. Niu Hulu Nechin hanged himself. Qianlong was entangled in rumors and could not clear his innocence. Every step of the layout is amazing. Take one step and count 100 steps. This is the brilliance of the poisoner of the Great Zhou. Ying Zheng sighed. He looked at Li Si, Wang Wan, Fang Quji and others. I didn't guess it. He fooled Qianlong and fooled all the outsiders who were watching the show. I am not as good as him in planning and winning thousands of miles away. Li Si and others were shocked and said in astonishment. Your Majesty. It was the first time they saw the arrogant emperor say that he was inferior to others. Ying Zheng said slowly. From now on, let people collect all the information about him. He will be the most difficult enemy of the Qin dynasty in the future. Li Si, Wang Wan, Fang Quji and others were shocked. It was the first time they saw the emperor treat someone so carefully. But when they thought of the poisonous scholar of the Great Zhou dynasty, they felt a chill in their hearts. This guy's plan is really vicious. Shuyu Palace. The sales of these 2 issues of the newspaper have tripled. Wu Mingyu rubbed her slender white fingers, staring at Yang Yi with her black eyes. I didn't expect you to have some tricks. Before, Yang Yi had kept her in suspense and said that there was a way to increase the sales of Dazhou Bao, but not only did he keep her in suspense, but she was so angry that she picked up the pen and wrote for a while. As a result, now, the sales have really increased, and by the way, he has also tricked a wave of enemies. This guy is really powerful, she muttered in her heart. Yang Yi smiled. Could I lie to your highness the princess? Wu Mingyu raised her eyebrows and rolled her eyes. I thought you could only make up stories to lie to people. Yang Yi raised his eyebrows. Speaking of stories, I do have a story. Do you want to hear it, your highness the princess? Wu Mingyu blinked and became interested. Tell me about it. Yang Yi smiled. It is said that there is a dragon king in the 4 seas. The dragon king controls the clouds and rains, governs the area, and is widely praised. One day, the dragon king planned to marry his daughter, and he required his son-in-law to weigh exactly 100 pounds. So, a turtle was ready to try, and met a shrimp on the way. The shrimp said, "You and I are exactly 100 pounds, I will hide in your ear, so no one will find me." The turtle was very happy and let the shrimp hide in his ear. When he arrived at the dragon king, he weighed it and it was indeed 100 pounds. The dragon king then chose him as his son-in-law. The turtle was so excited that he shook the shrimp out of his ear. The dragon king was furious. What are you doing in your ear, shrimp? Yang Yi paused when he said this. Wu Mingyu was fascinated and asked involuntarily. Then what? Then what? Continue telling the story. Quote. Yang Yi smiled at the pretty face of Her Royal Highness. Xiao Xia said I was in its ear, telling this little turtle a story. Wu Mingyu was stunned, then reacted. This guy was deliberately teasing her. She was furious and rushed over with a roar. Asshole, you are playing tricks on me. Yang Yi smiled and dodged to the side. Because the 5 senses enhanced by the system. His agility is not comparable to Wu Mingyu, and Wu Mingyu missed it with a slight move. Her Royal Highness was furious. This guy has been playing tricks on him many times, which is simply too much. If she doesn't teach him a lesson today, she will not be named Wu. Wu Mingyu rushed over again, but Yang Yi didn't let go this time. Wu Mingyu bumped into Yang Yi's arms, and her plump chest hit Yang Yi's chest firmly, which hurt. Wu Mingyu's face changed and she almost fainted from the pain. Compared to Wu Mingyu's pain, Yang Yi was secretly relieved. This girl is really good. Wu Mingyu quickly broke free from Yang Yi's arms, her fair face flushed. She covered her chest, glared at Yang Yi with her eyes like black pearls, and said angrily. Quote. Quote. Yang Yi spread her hands, quite helpless. What is wrong with your highness princess? It was obviously your highness who rushed over to take advantage of me. If there is a pervert, it can only be the princess. Wu Mingyu. This guy took advantage of me and still acted cute. It's so hateful, Yang Yi said with a smile. I suddenly remembered that I have something to report to His Majesty, so I'll leave first. After saying that, he left immediately without stopping. Wu Mingyu stomped her feet fiercely and grumbled. Pervert. After a while, Wu Mingyu rubbed her chest and felt the pain disappear. She took out the unfinished novel from the drawer, bit the pen, and continued to write. The beautiful and smart princess cleverly took advantage of the inferiority of human nature. The captured enemy generals, set up a game, invited people from all over the world to join, and helped her sister to extort a large sum of money from the enemy with exquisite calculations and amazing strategies, and also killed the enemy's generals with borrowed knives. Such meticulous planning and far-reaching layout made everyone marvel at the power of the world's #1 beauty strategist. Even her poor servant Yang Deya, who was as stupid as a pig, as dumb as a dog, and liked to look at big breasts, couldn't help but admire the princess and praised, the princess is really an excellent beauty with both beauty and talent. The beautiful and noble princess ignored the praise of her stupid servant and kindly told him a story about the dragon king seeking a son-in-law. The servant Yang Deya, who was as stupid as a pig, as dumb as a dog, and as foolish as a donkey, could not keep up with the thoughts of the clever princess. He was teased by the princess to tell a story to this little fool, and could only regret his stupidity painfully. Snap! Wu Mingyu closed the book in her hand, fell on the couch behind her, and breathed a long sigh of relief. Comfortable, humph, let you take advantage of me. Ha ha, idiot. Wu Mingyu's eyes curved into crescents, and her long legs with long sleeves couldn't help but lift up and jump a few times to relieve her inner excitement. The light green long skirt slipped off her legs, revealing 2 snow-white and delicate jade legs, slender and tender skin like ivory, jade feet raised high, and each jade toe was like a pink pearl with a bright luster. 2 days later, the sky was getting colder. In the Qianyuan Hall. In the corner was a copper beast stove, with charcoal burning slowly inside. The hall was quite warm. Wu Jiao pondered for a moment. Heike Changji's memorial said that Yucheng is now stable and completely incorporated into our Great Zhou. However, Qianlong seems to be still mobilizing troops. I heard that he transferred back the famous Qing general, the Manchu Zhenggong banner general, Zongjia Gui, and asked him to lead the troops to fight with our Great Zhou again. I plan to transfer Heike Changji back. Since Qianlong still wants to fight again, my Great Zhou will also accompany him to the end. Everyone nodded. The Great Zhou now has confidence, and is definitely not as afraid of the Qing as it was at the beginning. What's more, they have received another wave of supplies from the Qing, and the treasury is not so tight now. As soon as she finished speaking, Yang Yi said immediately, "Your Majesty, I have something to say." Before he finished speaking, everyone's eyes fell on Yang Yi, with strange expressions on their faces. This Minister Yang wants to offer advice again. This guy is always thinking of bad ideas. Wu Jiao raised her eyebrows, glanced at him, and was silent for a moment. "Please speak, Mr. Yang," Yang Yi said seriously. "I think that although my Great Zhou is not afraid of the Qing dynasty, the enemy country has a deep foundation after all. I have a plan that can disrupt the enemy's military spirit." Her Majesty sat forward a little curious. "What's the plan?" Yang Yi said seriously. Qianlong's popularity in the Dazhoubao has not diminished at all. The discussion about Qianlong in the Dazhoubao is still going on, which shows the public's attention to him. However, destroying his reputation is not only a headache for him, but also has no practical effect. I suggest that we can take advantage of the fact that the topic of Qianlong in the Qing dynasty has not decreased, and take advantage of his popularity. Wu Yan chewed on the word carefully. Take advantage of the popularity. Everyone was also a little puzzled. Wei Yuanzhong bowed his hands. "May I ask Minister Yang, what is taking advantage of the popularity?" Yang Yi smiled slightly. "Mr. Wei, you are too polite. This so-called riding on the popularity is to create another topic with him as the topic when the world's attention is on him." Xu Jingzong, Zhang Zhangji and others were stunned and thought about something. Wu Jiao pondered. "Since you said so, I guess you have already had an idea." Yang Yi smiled slightly. "I have heard a rumor circulating among the people of Qing that Qianlong is not the son of the Emperor of Qing. So I combined many folk rumors and wrote a novel called Book and Sword Enmity Record. I have decided to publish it in Dazhoubao. I believe that Qianlong, who is now very popular and has aroused countless people's discussion, will definitely be able to set off a wave of enthusiasm again with this novel, so that countless people's attention will shift from his moral level to his life experience." Silence. The palace was eerily quiet. Wei Yuanzhong, Xu Jingzong and others looked at each other in surprise. This guy is too insidious. They finally understood Yang Yi's intention to take advantage of the popularity. He was planning to throw a basin of dirty water on Qianlong while everyone's eyes were still on him. Everyone looked at Yang Yi and his eyes gradually changed. This Yang Shilang was too insidious. Under normal circumstances, writing such a vernacular novel to question the emperor might not cause any waves. But at this time of national discussion, it was revealed that his background was problematic. It might not have any impact on Qianlong's position, but at least it could disgust Qianlong. It even caused unrest among the people of Qing. Everyone was sweating. This guy really has a lot of bad ideas. It's so bad that pus is flowing. Wu Jiao had a blank expression on her face. There were also waves in her heart. This strategy was too vicious. This was like rubbing salt into the wound. Qianlong was probably going to be disgusted by Yang Yi and vomit blood. Compared with Yang Yi, she found herself to be a living Buddha. Xu Jingzong coughed lightly. "Minister Yang's plan is very good, but it is just a guess after all. With your identity, it is a bit disgraceful for our Great Zhou to personally participate in it." Everyone nodded subconsciously. Although this plan sounds very vicious, it would be a loss of face for a minister of a country to write a novel to slander the emperor of an enemy country. Yang Yi smiled faintly. Mr. Shu's words make sense. But of course I will use a pen name. I wonder if you have heard of Runtu. Shu Jingzong was stunned, and then pondered. It seems to be the author of Dream of Red Mansions. Yang Yi said seriously. Yes, that is my pen name. Publishing, book and sword, under this name and slandering Qianlong is Runtu's business. What does it have to do with me, Yang Yi? Everyone. It makes sense. Shu Jingzong stroked his beard and his eyes lit up. I heard that Dream of the Red Chamber was a famous book. Many people bought Da Zhou Bao just to read Dream of the Red Chamber. I didn't expect it was done by Minister Yang. Minister Yang is really a genius. Moreover, if it is published under this famous pen name, it will surely attract a lot of readers. In addition, the mystery of Qianlong's life experience will surely make it popular in various countries. The more popular it is, the more uncomfortable Qianlong will be. Everyone's eyes lit up. Yes, they didn't expect there would be such a benefit. Everyone looked at Yang Yi with some admiration. This guy's casual work can actually become a book. He is really a genius. Yang Yi smiled slightly. Mr. Shu is right. Some things are more difficult to say than to say. As long as it can attract a considerable amount of attention, white can become black, and black can become white. Qianlong will be confused by then. Even the emperor's life experience is a mystery. How can the soldiers of the Qing dynasty have the mind to go all out to fight against my great Zhou? Everyone took a breath, a little shocked. Yang Yi's trick may be very clever, but it's really too mean. Let alone the enemy, they were sweating just listening. The next day, Yang Yi exchanged a copy of Book and Sword from the system store and began to drastically modify the background in it. After all, there is no such thing as anti-Qing and restoration of Ming in this world. He modified the background in it and retained the plot. In Jin Yang's The Book and the Sword, Qianlong was designed to be the brother of Chen Jiaoluo, the leader of the anti-Qing organization Red Flower Society. In history, the Chen family in Haining, Zhejiang really existed. There are many different opinions about Qianlong's life in later generations, and a considerable part of them come from unofficial history, and there are also novelists Moe. But these are not important, anyway, as long as it looks like that. Yang Yi didn't expect this thing to have any effect, but it can disgust people. Anyway, for him, it's just a matter of convenience. Shuyu Palace. Wu Mingyu looked at Yang Yi with strange eyes. She held the manuscript of The Book and the Sword that Yang Yi had just given her. 430 Yang Yi was a little uncomfortable when she was looked at by her. He smiled slightly. Why does your highness look at me like this? Wu Mingyu wrinkled her nose. She circled around Yang Yi, muttering. I didn't realize that you were so. It's not enough to use public opinion to destroy Qianlong's reputation, but you even wrote a novel to frame him. Quote. R.O. She paused halfway through her words. Wait, writing him into the novel to frame him. Isn't this talking about herself? Could it be that this pervert knew that she secretly wrote a novel to scold him, so he deliberately made indirect accusations here? Wu Mingyu's face was uncertain. It doesn't matter if Yang Yi finds out that she wrote a novel to scold him, but she will die. If this is discovered, how will she live? Willn't she be laughed at by Yang Yi for the rest of her life? When she thought of that terrible scene, Wu Mingyu shuddered. Yang Yi saw that Wu Mingyu looked strange, and couldn't help but feel curious. Your Highness, are you feeling unwell? Wu Mingyu shuddered and quickly reacted. Ah, I'm fine. Quote, by the way, how did you think of writing him into the novel? Although Yang Yi was a little surprised by Wu Mingyu's expression, he didn't think too much about it. He smiled and said, the mystery of Qianlong's life experience is a folk rumor. I also think that I can't waste this time of attention from the world, so I thought of writing a novel to discredit him, at least to disgust him and make him sleep poorly and eat poorly. Is that so? Wu Mingyu breathed a sigh of relief. It would be good if Yang Yi didn't find any clues. Yang Yi suddenly came over, staring at Wu Mingyu. His handsome face was close at hand, and his dark eyes seemed to be able to poke into her heart. Your Highness, are you hiding something from me? Wu Mingyu's face froze, and a trace of panic flashed in her dark eyes. She waved her hands quickly. Haha, how is that possible? I have no interest in you at all, what can I hide from you? Hee, don't be so self-indulgent. Quote, Yang Yi raised his eyebrows. Really? Wu Mingyu's heart skipped a beat, and she quickly pushed Yang Yi out of the palace. Okay, humph, I'm going to rest. I'll pass on what you said. Yang Yi smiled and said nothing, just staring at Wu Mingmu. Wu Mingyu felt uneasy. She quickly pushed Yang Yi away, then closed the door, and turned her head to the door. After a while, when Yang Yi's footsteps gradually became farther and farther away, Wu Mingyu breathed a sigh of relief. She patted her full and white chest, and a wave of waves surged. It was a close call. She was almost discovered by this pervert. Fortunately, the princess, the most beautiful woman in the world, was smart and clever, and she used a little trick to fool the servant Yang Dia, who was lazier than a pig, dumber than a dog, lazy, greedy, lustful, liked to see big breasts, and liked to take advantage. Chapter 51. 10 days later. Qing Dynasty. Jinluan Palace. Agui, Qianlong, wrapped in a golden dragon patterned quilt, was a little tired, and his face was unhealthily ruddy. Zongjia Agui bowed respectfully. Your Majesty. Qianlong's eyes were full of coldness. I will give you 300,000 troops and horses. Although Zhou defeated my Qing dynasty's iron cavalry is unparalleled in the world. Zhou Kingdom can't be the opponent of my Qing dynasty. This time, you must show the power of my Qing dynasty. Zongjia Agui said in a deep voice, Yes, Your Majesty. Quote. He also knew that Qianlong had been smeared by Zhou Guo. If he could defeat Zhou Guo this time, he would be able to vent the emperor's anger and get the emperor's favor. Qianlong nodded slightly, and his face looked much better. He really couldn't stand Yang Yi's disgust this time. If he didn't fight back, he would get sick. Just then, Your Majesty, something bad has happened. Eunuch Hai rushed in with a newspaper. When Qianlong saw the newspaper, his eyes shrank and he had a bad premonition in his heart. He said in a deep voice, What's wrong? Eunuch Hai's face was pale. He didn't dare to say much and presented the newspaper in his hand. Your Majesty, please take a look. Quote. Qianlong grabbed the newspaper, looked at it carefully, and frowned. It was just a serialized story novel. His tense heartstrings relaxed immediately, and he couldn't help but glared at Eunuch Hai. A mere novel scared you like this? Eunuch Hai had a hard time saying it, and he said carefully. Your Majesty, please read it carefully. Qianlong was a little confused, and couldn't help but look at Eunuch Hai. But Eunuch Hai was his trusted eunuch after all, and he shouldn't take the newspaper to the bed for no reason. He pondered for a moment, and patiently read the story called, Book and Sword. Eunuch Hai presented several newspapers, not just one issue. Zongjia Agui on the side was a little confused, but he didn't dare to disturb Qianlong at this time. After a while, Qianlong's roar suddenly sounded in the quiet hall. Asshole, asshole. A roar like thunder. The whole palace was filled with astonishment, which frightened the sleepy Zongjia Agui. Zongjia Agui raised his head quickly, and saw that Qianlong, who had just been quite calm, was now furious, with red eyes and blue veins on his forehead, like a mad lion. Qianlong tore all the newspapers in his hand into pieces. These fools dared to slander. And said I am not the son of the late emperor. Absurd, it is simply absurd. Zongjia Agui was shocked when he heard it. He took a breath and his eyes widened. What did he just hear? Slandering the emperor for not being the son of the late emperor. This is simply stepping on the emperor's face. No wonder Qianlong was almost mad. Eunuch Hai, Zongjia Agui was silent, and dared not say a word. After a while, Qianlong's scolding stopped. His face was abnormally pale, and his cold eyes stared straight at Eunuch Hai. Do you know who wrote this story? Eunuch Hai shuddered for no reason. Your Majesty, I heard that the newspaper was founded by the third princess of Zhou and Yang Yi. My men have collected a lot of information. The author of the previous bestseller, Dream of Red Mansions, seems to be Yang Yi. And this, Book and Sword, and Dream of Red Mansions, have the same author. Bang! Qianlong punched the table, and the teacup on the table trembled. He growled, Yang Yi, this fool again. Qianlong turned around suddenly and looked at Zongjia Agui coldly. Agui, I will give you another 100,000 light cavalry and 20,000 iron pagodas. You will go to war within 3 days. I want Yang Yi's head within 3 months. If you can't get Yang Yi's head, you will bring it to me. Zongjia Agui's heart shuddered. 20,000 iron pagodas. You should know that even a powerful country like the Qing dynasty can only afford 40,000 to 50,000 iron pagodas. Each iron pagoda cavalry was bought with a huge amount of money and was invaluable. Every time the iron pagoda was deployed, the Qing dynasty would spend a huge amount of money. This time, the emperor really did it. 400,000 soldiers and horses, plus 20,000 iron pagodas. If such a large force still cannot take down the Zhou kingdom, he can really commit suicide. Zhang Jiagui said hurriedly. Yes, Your Majesty. Quote, after exposing Qianlong's privacy, the Da Zhou Bao has become a popular entertainment publication in the Central Plains. The Book and the Sword, which was serialized in the Da Zhou Bao, caused a sensation in the Qing dynasty. It was not because the story was so exciting, but because the plot almost made it clear that Qianlong was not the son of Yongzheng, which shocked all the people who saw it. The streets and alleys of the entire Qing dynasty were discussing this matter. Especially in the capital. Alas, you said that the emperor is the son of this Haining Chen Zhe Lao Chen Shixin, is this credible? Who can know this? But I heard that the emperor stayed in the private garden of the Haining Chen family several times when he went to the south of the Yangtze River. This is indeed quite suspicious. Hush, you are crazy, you are so desperate, you dare to discuss such things, be careful to be arrested by the government. Tisk tisk tisk, you are too brave, but this, Book and Sword, is well founded, it doesn't seem to be made up. Everyone is quiet, quiet, the soldiers are coming. The people who were still discussing just now suddenly dispersed. Such scenes can be seen everywhere in the Qing dynasty. The privacy of nobles is what everyone likes to discuss. What's more, the emperor is the ruler of a country, especially when it comes to such a mystery of his life experience and royal scandals, which makes Miao Fen, who is watching the fun, even more eager to explore the truth. Ming Dynasty. Father, is Yang Yi's move too insidious? Zhu Biao frowned and looked at the freshly released Da Zhou Bao. Although Yang Yi used the pen name, Runtu, to cover himself up. But for the state machine, it is too easy to find out the person behind Book and Sword. Would it be possible to publish such a novel that slanders the enemy emperor's life without the approval of Yang Yi and Princess Wu San? Such a sinister idea, no matter how you look at it, seems to be the work of Yang Yi. Zhu Yuanzhang touched his beard and smacked his lips. It is more difficult to prevent the people from talking than to prevent the river from flooding. Yang Yi is a master at playing with people's hearts. It was rumored that Qianlong had moral problems before, but after a few days, fewer people discussed it. After a while, no one will continue to pay attention to Qianlong. Yang Yi is grabbing the last tail, taking advantage of the moment before Qianlong disappears from the eyes of the people, and throwing a basin of dirty water on him. Biao, remember this. Once people are enraged, they will do irrational things. Once a king makes a wrong decision, the consequences are often unbearable. Yang Yi probably thought so, but this time he seems to have made some mistakes. Quote, according to the intelligence of the Jinyue, Qianlong was furious when he heard that Qianlong had mobilized 400,000 troops and 20,000 iron pagodas. He had issued a death order and was determined to get Yang Yi's head. Zhu Biao opened his mouth wide when he heard this, with a look of shock on his face. Father, I don't understand, Yang, what good does it do for ye to anger Qianlong like this? With 400,000 soldiers and 20,000 iron pagodas that are known to be invincible in the world, what exactly does he want? Qianlong's move is indeed a bit irrational. Due to the previous disastrous defeat, the Qing dynasty is now going to war again. Once it loses, it will completely consume the vitality of the Qing dynasty that has been recuperating for decades. However, the premise is that the Zhou people can win. Quote, if they can't win, then the Zhou kingdom will be destroyed. Zhu Yuanzhang stroked his beard, and his eyes showed a complex look. Yes, 20,000 iron pagodas, this is almost half of the iron pagodas of the Qing people. Quote, Qianlong pulled out the iron pagodas in anger, obviously hating Yang Yi to the extreme. Quote, we also think that Yang Yi angered Qianlong too much this time. Although his strategy is fine, the premise is that he can hold it back. The question is, can he stop the Qing people's 300,000 troops and 20,000 iron pagodas? But Yang Yi doesn't look reckless at all. Maybe, he really has a trick to deal with it. We don't understand him either. Zhu Biao shook his head. I think Yang Yi is in danger this time. He is playing too much tricks. Tang Dynasty. Inside Taiji Hall. Haha, interesting. Li Shimin held the newspaper. His eyes half smiled. Yang Yi used this story to slander the mystery of Qianlong's life experience. Qianlong was indeed enraged. 300,000 troops, plus 20,000 iron pagodas, how should Yang Yi deal with it? Changsun Wuji pondered. I don't understand why he is so unwise and deliberately angered Qianlong. Now, Qianlong has taken out his family's wealth, even if he loses his vitality, he will take his life. If Zhou Kingdom can't resist, it will be a disaster of national destruction. He was backfired by conspiracy this time. Fang Xuanling, Du Ruhui, Yao Shilian and others nodded slightly. Hu Junji said in a deep voice, 300,000 elites and 20,000 heavy cavalry, the Qing kingdom is indeed not to be underestimated. With such a force, even my Tang dynasty cannot be underestimated. This kid is really out of his mind. Li Jing was silent. Li Ji on the side stroked his beard and shook his head. Zhou State has a flat terrain, which is most suitable for cavalry charge. And the Iron Pagoda is the world's top heavy armored cavalry. Yang Yi has repeatedly won victories by conspiracy and tricks, but now he is about to be attacked. Only the upright and honest is the right way, and the insidious and vicious schemes are just a small trick. Changsun Wuji nodded slightly. Yes, Zhou State has grown from a weak country to what it is now, and the role of Yang Yi's vicious schemes is immeasurable. But because of this, he relies too much on insidious tricks, but forgets that in the face of real strength, all conspiracies and tricks are like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Now that he is attacked by his own insidious tricks, it is also a joke. Everyone in the hall nodded slightly, sneering. Obviously, they did not think that Yang Yi could still have a chance to turn defeat into victory in the face of such a huge military force of the Qing state. At this point, they felt quite comfortable. Since their emperor began to pay attention to Yang Yi's repeated strategies were unexpected and completely crushed them, and they felt very aggrieved. Especially Li Shimin praised Yang Yi as a first-class counselor every time, which slapped their faces even more. They were famous ministers in the Lingen Pavilion, so how could they not be as good as a junior? Now, seeing that Yang Yi was backfired by their own tricks, they felt very happy. What's the use of just playing tricks? Can you achieve great things by relying on insidious strategies? Isn't it backfired now? Li Shimin glanced at the ministers and felt a little sorry. His thoughts were exactly the same as those of Zongsun Wuji and others. The Qing dynasty's counterattack regardless of the cost immediately cast a shadow on the Zhou dynasty. As long as Yang Yi could not come up with a strategy to resist, the Zhou dynasty would be in danger of destruction. He felt a little sorry for a talent like Yang Yi. Although insidious tricks are just a small trick, they are indeed very useful sometimes. However, if Yang Yi died in the hands of the Qing people, that would not be bad. After all, Yi's strategies were too vicious. Even Li Shimin felt uncomfortable. Rather than let him become an enemy of the Tang dynasty in the future, it is better to die in the hands of Qianlong. Dakan, Zongtai Palace. Your Majesty, Yang Yi's move is a way to death. Li Si's face was serious. It is extremely insidious to destroy the reputation of the emperor of a country with words, and now he deserves this disaster. He did not forget that he was accidentally compared with Yang Yi by the emperor last time, and he said a few words and was severely ridiculed by the emperor. Li Si did not dare to be angry with the emperor, so he could only remember this hatred on Yang Yi. Now seeing that Yang Yi is going to be finished, he is very happy. Fang Quji nodded in agreement. Yes, Your Majesty, Yang Yi is a little clever and has repeatedly offered poisonous schemes, but the schemes are too vicious and harmful to the harmony of nature. Little do they know that if they are used too much, one day, they will harm themselves. The king also nodded repeatedly. Ying Zheng remained silent. He did not care about Li Si and others' ridicule of Yang Yi, but fell into deep thought. According to his analysis of Yang Yi's previous efforts to turn the tide, this boy must have made plans before taking action. Moreover, each time was unexpected. The consequence of thoroughly angering Qianlong was that the Qing dynasty would fight the Zhou dynasty with all its strength. This was not the previous small fight. It was a battle of life and death. Did Yi have confidence, so he deliberately angered Qianlong? Or was it just as Li Si and the others said, that he used too many insidious tricks and accidentally capsized? If it was the former, Ying Zheng could never figure out how the Zhou kingdom would deal with the Qing kingdom's full-scale attack. If it was the latter, he could only sigh. An excellent talent was defeated like this. Da Zhou, Council Hall. Your Majesty, the front line reported urgently that Qianlong has allocated the famous General Zhang Jiagui, as well as 400,000 troops and 20,000 iron pagodas, and is rushing towards our Da Zhou. The Minister of War Zhang Jianji reported to the Empress with a serious face. Hiss. When he finished speaking, the hall was silent. Xu Jingzong, Wei Yuanzhong, Li Yifu and others all looked horrified. They were trembling in their hearts. This is over. The Qing kingdom is using the whole country's strength to attack their Da Zhou. Don't look at their confidence before. It is indeed possible to fight with the Qing dynasty. But the premise is that the two sides are evenly matched, or the gap is not big. And now the Qing dynasty has directly mobilized 400,000 troops and the dreaded Iron Pagoda. What should we do? Is Qianlong crazy? If he fights like this, the Qing dynasty will also be seriously injured. Everyone's mind is blank. Wu Zhao's cold and noble face also showed a solemnity. Qianlong's move was indeed a bit hysterical. Even she had to be cautious. The hall was quiet and even. Everyone was immersed in the fear brought by the enemy. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded. Zhang Shangshu, did you miss a sentence? How did I hear that Qianlong seemed to have asked Zhang Jiagui to issue a military order to take Yang Yi's head? The words of this person echoed in the hall. Everyone's faces gradually became strange. They looked in the direction of the voice and saw a man standing at the door. A man in a python robe, a golden crown, a pale face, deep eye sockets and a careless face stood there. Xu Jingzong, Wei Yuanzhong and others looked strange. When did this person come back? Why did he come to mix in the excitement? Wu Zhao glanced at him and said lightly, King Wei, why are you back? This person is one of her half-brothers, Wu Yuanshuang. However, he was not well behaved and was not liked by the previous emperor, so he was made a king early and thrown into a remote area. Wu Yuanshuang said with a smile, Your Majesty, have you forgotten that in a month, it will be the anniversary of my father's death? Of course, I will come back to visit him. Yang Yi raised his eyebrows and glanced at Wu Yuanshuang. He seemed to have heard that the Empress had two illegitimate brothers, one Wu Yuanqing and the other Wu Yuanshuang. However, both of them were given fiefs. They were rarely seen. I didn't expect him to come back suddenly at this time. Wu Zhao's voice was calm. Of course I won't forget. Quote. Wu Yuanshuang nodded slightly, his face suddenly became serious. Your Majesty, I have heard the news that the Qing army is approaching along the way. Now my great Zhou is in danger and in a desperate situation. Quote. Wu Zhao had no expression on her face. Oh, do you have a way to solve it? Wu Yuanshuang said seriously. It was Yang Yi who provoked Emperor Qianlong, and Emperor Qianlong also wanted Yang Yi's life by name. In my opinion, it is better to send Yang Yi out and apologize to the Qing dynasty. Maybe this matter will be resolved. Quote. Everyone, do you think what I said is right? In the current situation, Yang Yi is obviously a guilty minister. Quote. Yang Yi's eyelids jumped. This guy is here with bad intentions. Everyone looked at each other when they heard this. For a moment, the hall fell into a strange silence. If Qianlong suddenly sent troops to the border, it would be impossible for them not to blame Yang Yi. If you hadn't insisted on smearing him, Qianlong wouldn't have been so hysterical as to spend all his family's wealth to fight. Yang Yi smiled, thinking that he didn't seem to have provoked the king of Wei. This guy came up and made him hate him. The hall was quiet for a while. Wu Zhao's cold voice sounded. Shut up, I will never hand over Yang Qing anyway. Quote. Then Qianlong insulted my great Zhou, and Yang Qing worked hard for my great Zhou, how can he be considered a criminal? Wu Yuanshuang was scolded by the Empress, and his face was immediately embarrassed. He held it in for a long time before snorting. I am also for the great. Besides this, what other ways can we resist the 400,000 troops of the Qing dynasty? The ministers in the hall looked at each other. Although the words of His Royal Highness the Prince of Wei were unpleasant, they seemed to make sense. The cavalry of the Qing dynasty was not a joke. Wu Zhao frowned. She glanced at everyone. Do you have any good ideas? Everyone bowed their heads. The strength of the Qing army is here, and no matter what strategies there are, it will be useless. Wu Jiao was a little disappointed. She still looked calm, and her eyes fell on Yang Yi. Yang Yi still looked calm, as if the criminal minister Wu Yuanshuang mentioned had nothing to do with him. Wu Jiao pondered, with a last glimmer of hope. Mr. Yang, do you have a plan to repel the enemy? Everyone's eyes fell on Yang Yi, some with expectation, some with disdain, some with sneers, and all kinds of attitudes. Yang Yi smiled slightly and bowed to the Empress. Reporting to Your Majesty, there is no plan to repel the enemy. Everyone looked disappointed. Wu Yuanshuang sneered. He didn't believe that this pretty boy could come up with any good plan when the enemy had come to the door. Wu Jiao was also a little disappointed, but she didn't say much, just nodded slightly. It doesn't matter if there is no plan, my great Zhou. Before she finished her words, she heard Yang Yi continue. Your Majesty, there is no plan to repel the enemy, but there is a plan to destroy the enemy. Wu Jiao was stunned when she heard this, and her phoenix eyes showed astonishment. Xu Jingzong and other officials were also stunned, and then everyone reacted. They took a breath and were shocked. A plan to destroy the enemy. They suddenly felt a tingling sensation on their scalps. This Yang Shilang is still so arrogant. There is a difference between repelling the enemy and destroying the enemy, but there is a world of difference. Wu Yuanshuang's face froze. He glanced at Yang Yi with some dissatisfaction. This pretty boy is probably talking nonsense. How can they be a match for the hundreds of thousands of Qing cavalry? He said coldly. Yang Yi, right, you provoked the Qing yourself, and implicated my great Zhou. Now that we are facing a powerful enemy, you are still talking nonsense. Destroy the enemy. What nonsense are you talking about? Shut up. The cold voice of the Empress suddenly sounded. Wu Yuanshuang's face changed. He never expected that Wu Jiao would scold him so mercilessly. He was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. However, facing the cold eyes of the Empress, Wu Yuanshuang immediately became a lot more timid. This sister of his is really ruthless. He glanced at Yang Yi hatefully and muttered. Quote. Wu Jiao looked at Yang Yi and her voice softened. Yang Qing, if you have any plan, just tell me. Everyone looked at Yang Yi. Xu Jingzong and others showed expectation. They couldn't help but have a glimmer of hope in their hearts. After all, it wasn't the first time that Yang Yi had turned the tide, maybe this time he would have a chance as well. Yang Yi touched his chin. Your Majesty, this plan of mine will take 3 days. After 3 days, you will see the result for yourself. Xu Jingzong and others were stunned and a little confused. 3 days later, Wu Yuanshuang sneered when he heard it. You are not stalling for time to run away, are you? Yang Yi smiled slightly. Even if His Royal Highness the King of Wei runs away, I won't run away. Wu Yuanshuang frowned, and the blood vessels on his forehead jumped. This fool dared to ridicule him. Just as he was about to scold, he heard a majestic voice. I believe in Yang Qing. Quote. Wu Yuanshuang shut up immediately. He cursed Wu Jiao in his heart, saying that she was probably deceived by this pretty boy. He wanted to see what this pretty boy could do in 3 days. The court meeting was over. Yang Yi left the palace and came to a secret place in the imperial city. On the other side, Wu Yuanshuang returned to his mansion. Wei Wangfu, Your Highness, this is the sincerity of my master. I hope you will fulfill your promise. A man in brocade clothes and with a gloomy face smiled. In front of him, there were 6 open boxes, with dazzling jewels and gold bars emitting dazzling brilliance. Wu Yuanshuang glanced at the boxes greedily and smiled. Go back and tell Zhang Jiagui that I will definitely get things done after I receive the money. Single quote. I will definitely let Dazhou hand over Yang Yi. But you must do what you promised me. After giving you Yang Yi's head, you must withdraw your troops. Fighting and killing is not good. My great Zhou is willing to coexist peacefully with the Qing kingdom. The Qing envoy said with a fake smile. I will definitely bring the words of the King of Wei to my master. Goodbye. Then, the Qing envoy put on his hat and left the King of Wei's mansion. Yucheng, General Heike, the enemy is coming fiercely. I'm afraid it will be difficult for us to hold on. Guo Jingji's face was a little ugly. Heike Chengji wiped the blood on his face and spat fiercely. This Zongjia Agui is crazy. With a full 400,000 troops, is he going to surround us to death? Many soldiers smiled bitterly. After Zongjia Agui got the army, he attacked them immediately. After all, the Qing kingdom was defeated by them before and lost Yucheng to them. Zongjia Agui is now leading troops to attack the Great Zhou, so naturally he has to take Yucheng back first. However, the other side has hundreds of thousands of soldiers and horses, while they have less than 100,000 soldiers. This gap is really too big. If they were not backed by the city, they would not be able to hold on. Even so, the casualties were heavy. If the other side continues to besiege like this, they really can't hold on. Heike Chengji glanced at the soldiers around him, glanced at Li Kunshao who was still standing straight, secretly said a monster, and then said in a deep voice. No matter how many people they JFI have, as long as your majesty does not let us retreat, we will stay here to the death. The city is here and the people are here. The city is gone and the people are gone. On the other side, Qing army camp, Zongjia Agui said lightly. Send someone to tell the Zhou army that as long as Yang Yi is handed over, my army will stop attacking Zhou. The person next to him said respectfully. Yes, army. Quote. Then, the soldier left. In the tent, only Zongjia Agui was left. Zongjia Agui narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself. Next, the people of Zhou will definitely be resentful of you. Yang Yi, how should you deal with it? 3 days later. Council Hall. Your Majesty, urgent news from the front line. Zhang Zhangji looked grim. Zongjia Agui led his troops to attack Yucheng. Our army has suffered thousands of casualties. The enemy has several times the number of troops as ours. Yucheng is in danger. Everyone's heart sank when they heard this, and a sense of oppression came over them. Hundreds of thousands of troops, and that first-class iron pagoda, of course, is suffocating. Wu Zhao's expression did not change, and her cold and noble face was full of calmness. She held the edge of the dragon throne and said in a deep voice. The enemy is coming fiercely, and the Great Zhou must not retreat. Quote. Mr. Zhang, how many troops can be mobilized now? Zhang Zhangji was silent for a while, and then slowly said. Except for the garrisons of various parties and the standing troops of the capital, there are only 300,000 troops that can be mobilized at present. But these 300,000 troops cannot all be transferred to Heike Chengji. Among them, a considerable number of troops are new recruits. The palace was full of depression. Even if all the troops were mobilized, it might not be able to shake the enemy. This is the gap between a small country and a big country. Wu Yuanshuang glanced at the palace and said in a deep voice. Your Majesty, Zhang Jia Agui claimed that as long as Yang Yi was handed over, he would stop attacking Zhou. Single quote. I'm not just saying this casually. The enemy is coming fiercely now. If we don't hand over Yang Yi, our Great Zhou will definitely be seriously damaged in the end. As long as we hand over Yang Yi, nothing will happen. Now that 3 days have passed, Yang Yi kept saying that he had a way, but now he has disappeared without a trace. If you still hope that he can save the Great Zhou, you might as well believe that pigs can climb trees. In my opinion, just hand him over, and the crisis of our Great Zhou can be solved immediately. After he finished speaking, many people in the hall looked excited. Although Yang Yi has made countless contributions to the Great Zhou, for them, if they can hand over a person in exchange for national peace, it seems that it is not a bad idea. Li Yifu said immediately, Your Highness, the King of Wei is right. I think handing over Yang Yi is the best solution now. Many officials were in a commotion, and they whispered. My Great Zhou is indeed unable to withstand the army of Zhang Jia Agui. If we hand over Yang Shilang, how will others see my Great Zhou? My Great Zhou has reached the moment of life and death, what face do we still care about? Is Yang Shilang more important, or is my Great Zhou more important? The hall was noisy. Wu Yuanshuang smiled. For him, it didn't matter whether Yang Yi died or not. If he could hand over Yang Yi, he could not only drive away the enemy's troops, but also earn a lot of money. Wouldn't it be great? Wu Zhao's cold voice echoed in the hall. I will never hand over my own subjects in order to survive. Wu Yuanshuang's face froze. He looked at the Empress in the distance in a bit of astonishment. He was a bit mad. At this time, this woman was still so stubborn. Everyone suddenly quieted down and looked at the Empress with complicated eyes. If the Empress handed over Yang Yi without hesitation, they would be a bit sad. Now that the Empress insisted on not handing it over, it made them feel that this Majesty was a good emperor and a worthy emperor. Just then, a guard ran in hurriedly and said respectfully, "Your Majesty, Minister Yang asked everyone to go to the martial arts arena. His strategy to defeat the enemy is ready." Everyone was stunned when they heard the words, and they were all dumbfounded. There really is a plan. Wu Zhao's eyes flashed with a hint of joy. She patted the dragon chair. "Let's go and take a look." Quote, Martial arts arena. When everyone arrived here, they found that besides Yang Yi, there were some people in prison uniforms. Yang Yi saluted Wu Zhao. "Beef." Wu Zhao nodded slightly, her black and white eyes seemed to carry hope in her eyes. Her voice was soft. "Any ideas?" Yang Yi said with a smile. "Winning is in hand." Wu Yuanshuang on the side sneered. "Winning is in hand. Depending on what? You won't rely on these prisoners behind you, will you?" Yang Yi raised his eyebrows and said calmly. "King Wei has a good idea, he really relies on these prisoners." The arena was silent. The officials looked at Yang Yi in amazement. Is Minister Yang serious? Wu Yuanshuang's face flushed. He felt that Yang Yi was playing a trick on him. He snorted coldly. "Yang Yi, you are still talking nonsense at this time. Do you know how many people died on the front line every day because of you?" Yang Yi narrowed his eyes and looked at Wu Yuanshuang with a smile. "Don't worry, Your Highness Wei Wang. No matter how many soldiers of my great Zhou sacrificed, I will make the enemy return many times." Then, he ignored Wu Yuanshuang and said to the Empress, "Your Majesty, I have arranged everything. Your Majesty, please see." Wu Zhao nodded slightly. A trace of expectation flashed in Shangguan Wanner's eyes. Xu Jingzong, Wei Yuanzhong and others were also shocked and focused. Yang Yi smiled slightly and waved his hand. In the distance, a prisoner gritted his teeth and rushed forward with a black thing in his arms. Not far in front of the prisoner, there were some exquisite armors hanging. The armors were filled with straw, disguised as dummies. There were 4 rows in total, a total of 16. Everyone looked at the prisoner rushing towards the group of armored men, confused. The next moment, a huge explosion sounded. Boom! The terrifying flames instantly engulfed the armor and the prisoner. The huge explosion echoed in the martial arts arena. Everyone felt their heads go blank, buzzing. They stared at the explosion with dull eyes. For a while, the black smoke gradually dissipated. The armor that was just there had now been broken into countless pieces. Not a single one of the 16 armors was left. The ground was charred black, and there were some broken limbs and arms. Obviously the prisoners were blown to pieces. Shangguan Wanner covered her mouth. Her face was a little pale, and she was holding back her nausea. It was the first time she had seen such a bloody scene. Xu Jingzong, Wei Yuanzhong and others were also pale and horrified. They all took a breath of cold air and looked at the broken limbs and arms on the ground in great shock. A chill rushed straight up from the soles of their feet to the top of their heads. Their hair stood on end. What caused the explosion just now? It was so powerful. It was terrible. Wu Yuanshuang's legs were weak and his face was pale. The explosion just now caught him off guard. His legs were still weak and his ears were buzzing. Wu Zhao was the calmest, but she clenched her fists in her sleeves. She was also sweating coldly. At the moment of the explosion just now, she almost thought it was an earthquake. The martial arts field was dead silent. Wei Yuanzhong swallowed his saliva and looked at Yang Yi with shock in his eyes. "Minister Yang, this. Yang Yi smiled. "This weapon is called explosives, and I made it carefully. This thing is extremely powerful. As long as the amount is enough, even splitting mountains and rocks is no problem." Split mountains and rocks. Everyone's scalp numbed when they heard it. They looked at the charred place with shock on their faces and swallowed their saliva. It's incredible. Such a powerful weapon is simply horrifying. Wu Zhao's eyes were full of shock. Yang Yi had told her about the power of gunpowder before. She trusted Yang Yi at the time, so she agreed to Yang Yi to develop gunpowder and gave it to Yang Yi. After that, she forgot about it. She never expected that Yang Yi really developed it. Moreover, the power is far greater than she imagined. No wonder Yang Yi was not afraid of hundreds of thousands of soldiers and horses of the Qing dynasty. The power caused by such weapons is comparable to the legendary immortals. Yang Yi smiled and pointed to the charred ground. "I just put 16 sets of armor made of fine iron there. This armor is not inferior to the heavy armor of the Iron Pagoda. But, You all saw the result. No matter how strong the armor is, it is as fragile as paper in front of explosives. Do you think that if this explosive is used in the army, what will the Iron Pagoda be afraid of? Everyone was shocked when they heard this. 16 sets of armor comparable to the heavy armor of the Iron Pagoda were broken into pieces. Wouldn't the Iron Pagoda be powerless to fight back against this explosive? Thinking of this, everyone became excited and got goosebumps. They took a deep breath and looked at Yang Yi with shock. This Minister Yang is really full of tricks. He can even make something as terrible as explosives. Shangguan Wanner blinked her eyes and said thoughtfully, Minister Yang, the enemy will not stand there stupidly to be blown up. It may not be convenient for our army to use this explosive to blow them up. Everyone was stunned when they heard this and fell into deep thought. Shangguan Wanner's words also made sense. Yang Yi said with a smile. So, I got a group of strong death row prisoners here. These prisoners are all sentenced to death, and their crimes are unforgivable. I have promised them that if they are willing to hold the explosives and die with the enemy, I will reward their families with some money and property. If they can kill the local generals, the credit will be given to their families. Quote, the enemy doesn't know that our army has this kind of weapon. As long as the enemy cavalry charges over, they will hold the explosives and die with the enemy, then each person can blow up dozens of enemies, and exchanging lives in this way will surely break the enemy's morale. Hiss. Everyone took a breath of cold air and looked at Yang Yi with tingling scalps. As expected of the first poisoner of the Great Zhou, it's still the same. Let the prisoner hold the explosives and die with the enemy. Are you the living devil? You can actually come up with such a cruel trick. Everyone swallowed their saliva and got goosebumps on their bodies. The prisoner was blown up just now, but there was no trace of his body. Such a bloody death, ordinary people really can't stand it. Wu Zhao's phoenix eyes were also quite shocked. Her rosy lips opened slightly, and she was obviously shocked by Yang Yi's life-for-life fighting method. Yang Yi smiled. It's a waste of food to keep these death row prisoners. It's better to let them do their last bit to contribute to the Great Zhou and their families. But these prisoners are not enough. We have to mobilize death row prisoners from all over the country. I plan to form a suicide squad with them. Everyone holds explosives. No matter what kind of troops the enemy is, or how experienced the army is, as long as they dare to charge, the enemy will never return. It's best to get 10,000 or 20,000 people. Once they come, they can exchange lives for lives and severely injure the enemy's army. Or, we can draw soldiers from the army. After all, the speed and strength of soldiers in the army are far superior to ordinary prisoners. Suicide squad. Everyone looked at Yang Yi in shock. They swallowed their saliva with fear in their eyes. How cruel must a person be to come up with a group of suicide squads? They just thought of such a picture in their heads. A group of dead soldiers with explosives that can split mountains and rocks rushed towards them frantically, and they felt chilled. This is, as long as you are within the opponent's range, you will be blown to pieces. Who the hell can withstand it? Iron Pagoda. That's human flesh wearing armor. It was blown to pieces. It's worthy of being Yang Yanwang. Who the hell said he has no strategy? This is a bunch of bad ideas. Before they reacted, Yang Yi said again. You can also put iron sheets and nails in this explosive. In this way, when it explodes, these iron sheets and iron needles will pierce all nearby enemies. Silence. Everyone was stunned. They were sweating profusely. Putting iron sheets and nails in explosives, you are really good. This is too insidious. You are worthy of being the living devil. The martial arts field was quiet for a long time. Wu Zhao suppressed her excitement. She said in a deep voice. I will arrange for people to send these explosives to the front line later. Yang Qing, you have made great contributions. Yang Yi cupped his hands. Your Majesty, I have a man under my command who can take on this important task. I want him to lead this group of death squads to the front line. Wu Zhao raised her eyebrows and said without hesitation. Okay, then I will leave this matter to you. Quote, everyone looked at Yang Yi with envy. This honor is beyond envy. Yang Yi smiled slightly and said to Wu Yuanshuang, who had a complicated expression beside him. Your Highness Prince Wei, with this explosive, can the danger of the Qing dynasty be resolved? Wu Yuanshuang swallowed with some difficulty and smiled awkwardly. This explosive is quite powerful, but the battlefield is changing rapidly, so it's hard to say whether it will work. Yang Yi nodded in agreement. So this is why you secretly met with the Qing envoy and accepted his property. Everyone was stunned, and looked at Wu Yuanshuang with some understanding. Wu Yuanshuang's face suddenly turned pale, and he stammered. You, don't spit blood. Wu Shi on the side said coldly. I knew the Qing people from the first day they entered the city. Who do you think you can get with your little trick? Come on, take him away first. Wu Yuanshuang's face changed. Imperial sister, you can't kill me. Before my father died, he promised that we should be brothers and sisters and never kill each other. Gee, he was dragged away by the guards with a burst of ghosts and wolf howls. Yang Yi pouted. You think you are Guo Kai, the first god of war in the Warring States period. And you are paid to instigate. Yucheng, General Heike. Guo Jingji said with a bitter smile, we can't hold on any longer. Heike Chengji leaned against the city wall, feeling the pain in his body. He silently took out a piece of cloth and bandaged it, and continued, we have to defend this place no matter what. Guo Jingji sighed, glanced at Li Kunshao not far away, and smiled bitterly. This Li Kunshao is really a monster, as if he is never tired. Heike Chengji silently glanced at Li Kunshao and nodded slightly. That Minister Yang is extraordinary, even the person he recommended is extraordinary. Quote. In fact, if it weren't for Li Kunshao, their Yucheng would have been broken long ago. Li Kunshao swept the opposing cavalry several times like a god descending from heaven, which opened their eyes. However, the opponent had too many people. Even if Li Kunshao was a fierce general who could fight 1 against 100, it would be difficult for him to defeat these Qing troops. Kill! The shouts of the Qing army rang out again outside the city. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Heike Chengji's face condensed, and he glanced at the densely packed Qing army. The murderous intent that came to his face was like a substance. Everyone's face changed. The atmosphere suddenly became extremely depressing. Heike Chengji glanced at everyone and said in a deep voice, everyone, Yucheng is about to be broken. We eat the Emperor's salary and receive the Emperor's grace. Today, it's time to die for His Majesty. The soldiers were shocked when they heard this. I'm going to die for His Majesty. Heike Chengji held his weapon and roared. Long live the great Zhou. All the soldiers roared in unison. Long live the great Zhou. At this moment, the tragic and fear in their hearts all turned into high fighting spirit. Fight for His Majesty. Fight for the great Zhou. Just at this moment, suddenly, a burst of shouting and killing sounded. Shu Chu, the fierce general under the seat of Yang Shilang of the great Zhou, is here, why don't you Qing dogs surrender? Heike Chengji and others were stunned when they heard the words, and looked outside the city wall in astonishment. Li Kunshao's expression also moved, and his eyes were looking far away. At the end of his sight, he saw the junction of heaven and earth. A gust of smoke and dust swept in. A large flag with the word, Yang, engraved on it fluttered in the wind. The leader was a strong man with a lightning-like gaze and a murderous aura. Heike Chengji was overjoyed. It's reinforcements. Reinforcements are coming. Guo Jingji and others were ecstatic. Although they were ready to die, who would want to die if they could live? The reinforcements came, and there was hope for life. Suddenly, Guo Jingji's face looked a little strange. He said in shock, wait, why are there so few people? Everyone also reacted. They were shocked to see Shu Chu, who claimed to be a fierce general under Yang Yi, rushing into the enemy army with only a few thousand people. At this time, the enemy had also reacted. A group of cavalrymen in black heavy armor rushed towards Shu Chu. Oh no, it's the Iron Pagoda. Heike Chengji, Zouji and others were shocked. They never expected that the reinforcements brought by Shu Chu were so scarce. Besides, Shu Chu and others were gradually surrounded by the enemy's Iron Pagoda. Next, there would definitely be no chance of survival. The group of heavily armored Iron Pagodas rushed towards Shu Chu frantically. Guo Jingji and others turned pale. It's over. They closed their eyes, unable to bear watching their companions being torn to pieces by the iron-like Iron Pagoda. Heike Chengji was also furious, and slapped the top of the city wall. Under his sight, the group of Iron Pagodas had surrounded the sudden reinforcements of the Great Zhou. It seemed that they would trample these Great Zhou soldiers into meat paste in the next moment. Just then, boom, boom, Boom! A loud noise suddenly resounded through the sky. The dazzling flames seemed to break through everything in front of them. Those Iron Pagoda soldiers who had just approached and showed ferocious smiles were wrapped by the flames in front of them before they could react. Instantly torn into countless broken limbs. Bang bang bang. A series of explosions like thunder echoed on the battlefield. Those iron pagodas were like paper, and they instantly shattered into countless pieces of meat. Countless enemies screamed and wailed. Heikai Changji was completely dumbfounded. He opened his mouth wide and watched the scene. The shock was like a poisonous snake that severely restrained his heart. What on earth is this? Guo Jingji and others beside him were also startled by the violent explosion. They looked up suddenly and saw that those iron pagodas that were like steel were instantly blown into countless pieces. The broken limbs and arms flew all over the sky, and blood rain splashed. Hiss! The soldiers of the Great Zhou on the top of the city gasped. They looked at the terrible scene in shock and trembled all over. Nima, the invincible iron pagoda in their eyes was blown into pieces just like that. Gulp! I don't know who swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Everyone looked dazed, looking at those broken limbs and arms, their scalps tingled, and a chill swept over. What the hell is this horse? The world's top cavalry is as fragile as paper. Heikai Changji tightly grasped his weapon, not even noticing that his hand fat had turned white. His eyes were wide open. Such cruelty, could it be the work of that poisoner again? He still remembered Shu Chu's voice just now. He claimed to be a fierce general under Yang Yi. This is the first time he has seen such a weird and cruel battle. The enemy was blown to pieces. How did he do it? That Yang Shilang was too cruel. He is simply a living devil. On the other side, Zongjia Agui stared at the explosion in the distance with his eyes wide open. It was not until the fierce flames engulfed all the soldiers of the Iron Pagoda and blew them into rotten meat all over the sky. He roared with bloodshot eyes. What's going on? What is this? Zongjia Agui's eyes were full of bloodshot. This is the Iron Pagoda. Each Iron Pagoda was built with great energy and financial resources. These Iron Pagodas were selected from the army, and each of them was a Dali king. Otherwise, they couldn't wear heavy armor. When they charged, they were like a torrent of steel, crushing all flesh and blood. But now, they were blown to pieces without even a slag left. Until now, Zongjia Agui's head was still buzzing. The Qing deputy generals on the side were obviously also in great shock. No one responded to Zongjia Agui, and they all looked shocked. These Zhou troops that suddenly appeared were too terrifying. Zongjia Agui gritted his teeth. After all, he was a general who had experienced many battles, and he said in a deep voice. Immediately pass my order, everyone disperse, those people around. His order was issued. The Qing cavalry quickly distanced themselves. On the top of Yucheng City, Guo Jingji's face changed. General Heikai, the enemy has distanced themselves, what should we do now? The generals and soldiers also looked worried, although they didn't know how this support army created such a big explosion. However, it must be that only by getting close to the other side will they be blown up, and the enemy has obviously thought of such a result, so they distanced themselves. Heikai Changji clenched his fists, his eyes were sharp, and he was about to give an order. Suddenly, Jingji next to him shouted again. Quote. Everyone was stunned and looked over. They saw that in that Zhou army, people kept riding horses and rushing towards the enemy frantically. Although the enemy had gradually pulled away, there were too many Qing troops, and the speed of retreat was far behind the speed of these people's pursuit. The Zhou army soldier, who was tied with black explosives, rushed to the enemy camp on horseback and plunged into it. The next second, boom boom boom, a series of explosions rang out in unison. The horrible explosion was like thunder rolling in the sky, covering all the enemy troops within dozens of meters nearby. The flames of the explosion engulfed hundreds of enemy troops. The splashing iron nails shot through them like bullets. In the blink of an eye, the place where the explosion just happened was left with a scorched earth and tattered corpses. Hiss! Heikai Changji and others opened their eyes wide, shocked. Their scalps were numb. These reinforcements were too cruel. They blew themselves up directly. This one person could take away hundreds of enemy lives. Seeing the reinforcements, soldiers, rushing into the enemy's army one by one and then triggering the explosion. Heike Changji made a prompt decision. Open the city gate immediately. Let's rush out and attack the enemy from the front and back. Guo Jingji and others beside him roared. Yes, General. The next moment, Heike Changji led tens of thousands of Dajo cavalry and stabbed into the enemy camp like a sharp blade. The Qing soldiers, who were already panicked by the soldiers who blew up with explosive packs, were even more flustered at this time. The Qing formation was quickly dispersed by Heike Changji and his men. In such a large battlefield, Zongjia Agui's order could not be passed on in time. And the terrifying explosion became more and more intense. The Qing soldiers finally couldn't hold it anymore, and their legs became weak and began to run for their lives. Such a terrifying explosion, they couldn't stand it at all. Heike Changji quickly led his men to rush forward. Those Qing soldiers who were panicked by the explosion were slaughtered along the way and had no power to fight back. Zongjia Agui looked at the scattered Qing soldiers and his eyes went dark. It's over. He bit his tongue to let himself have the last bit of clarity, and then roared. Retreat. He immediately turned his horse's head and fled in the opposite direction surrounded by the soldiers. Once the main general retreated, the Qing generals behind him had even less desire to fight. They fled madly, only regretting that their parents did not give them 2 more legs. Heike Changji was overjoyed. Charge. 3 hours later. The Zhou army won a great victory. General Heike, I killed more than 60,000 enemy soldiers and captured 30,000 enemies, including 8,000 Iron Buddha soldiers, and the enemy was seriously injured. Guo Jingji was so excited that he trembled all over. The rest of the soldiers were shocked. They never expected that they would win such a huge victory in this battle. Heike Changji was shocked. This battle was fruitful and could be regarded as a great victory. At this time, a burly man came over. He had a rough face, a strong back and a bloody body. The soldiers next to him looked at him with awe. Just now, the general named Shu Chu charged very fiercely. Shu Chu looked serious and saluted Heike Changji. I am Shu Chu, and I meet General Heike. Heike Changji said hurriedly. General Shu is polite. If it weren't for General Shu, we would have been defeated this time. Shu Chu said in a deep voice. I am just following the orders of the adults. This is the brocade bag of the adults. The adults once said that if the crisis of Yucheng is resolved, this brocade bag will be handed over to General Heike. Heike Changji was stunned and subconsciously took the brocade bag from Shu Tong. He opened it immediately, looked at it for a few times, and immediately broke into a sweat. Guo Jingji, who was next to him, saw that Heike Changji's face looked different and hurriedly said. General Heike, what's wrong? The generals and soldiers also looked at Heike Changji curiously. They all wanted to know what Minister Yang wrote in it that made Heike Changji so scared. Heike Changji smiled bitterly and said, Minister Yang asked us to solve the siege of Yucheng and continue to pursue the Qing army and severely injure them. The generals and soldiers were stunned and all looked stunned. No one expected that Yang Yi would ask them to continue the pursuit. Although they won this time, they caught the other side off guard after all. If they charged face to face on the battlefield, they might not be able to just win. Guo Jingji smiled bitterly and said, Minister Yang has overestimated us. We only have 70,000 or 80,000 people here. How can we counterattack the enemy? The generals nodded one after another. Shu Chu said in a deep voice, I came to support Yucheng on the orders of Lord Yang this time. Later, there will be an army of nearly 100,000 people coming. Guo Jingji scratched his head. That's not enough to hit them hard. Heike Changji sighed. So, Minister Yang gave a plan. Everyone was refreshed and looked at Heike Changji with some curiosity. A plan? Heike Changji smiled bitterly. He had a strange look on his face. Minister Yang said that after the crisis in Yucheng is resolved, we will definitely capture the enemy's soldiers. He asked us to tie explosives to these prisoners, then tie their hands tightly, cover their mouths, and drive them to the enemy's camp. The Qing army will definitely not be able to stop these prisoners from returning. When these captives approach the enemy, our army will wrap the oilcloth with arrows and then ignite and shoot them. Use rockets to detonate the explosives on the captives and kill the enemy. He finished his words. Everyone took a breath of cold air and looked horrified. Everyone felt their hair stand on end. This strategy is too vicious. No wonder Yang Shilang is called the first poisoner in the Great Zhou dynasty. This horse is simply a living devil, using captives as human explosives. Everyone was stunned and couldn't help swallowing their saliva. They fought side by side with Shu Chu's army and understood what the so-called explosives were. It was because of this that they admired Yang Yi's strategy. Those Qing soldiers would never have thought that their companions were tied with deadly explosives. By the time they reacted, it was too late. They had 30,000 prisoners here. Even if only a few thousand of them were tied up, it would be enough for the Qing soldiers to drink hard. Guo Jingji rubbed his stiff cheeks and smiled bitterly. Minister Yang's strategy is indeed extraordinary. Everyone nodded with sympathy. Fortunately, they are friendly troops. If they were on the opposite side, they would be finished. Shu Chu said again. Lord Yang sent me to support Yucheng first, and the subsequent army carried a large amount of explosives. Heike Changji held the brocade bag and said in a deep voice. Since Minister Yang has made arrangements, let's act according to the plan. The soldiers were shocked. Yes, General. Quote, 3 days later. Qing Army Camp. General, our scouts found that the Zhou army was approaching. Quote. A guard ran over and said respectfully. Zongjia Agui frowned. He looked a little tired. The battle a few days ago caused him to lose almost a quarter of his troops, which seriously damaged his vitality and morale. I didn't expect that this group of Zhou soldiers would plan to counterattack so soon. Zongjia Agui walked out of the tent without hesitation. Prepare for battle. The previous defeat was his mistake. This time, he would teach the Zhou army a lesson no matter what. After a while, what's going on? Zongjia Agui stood on a hillside, looking at the black shadow in the distance in some astonishment. The enemy did not charge directly, but in front of them was a group of Qing prisoners with their hands tied and their mouths blocked. This. Zongjia Agui's eyes were full of doubts. What do these Zhou people want? 2. The Qing generals next to him were also confused. Are these Zhou people going to send all the prisoners back? They were extremely shocked and couldn't understand what the Zhou army was doing. On the other side, Heike Chang's eyes were full of solemnity. He looked at the Qing army camp in the distance and said in a deep voice. Let them all go immediately. Yes, Guo Jingji and others beside him said in a deep voice. Then, the soldiers of the Great Zhou received the order and immediately made way. The Qing prisoners who were being escorted were still confused, not knowing what was going on. They walked forward tentatively. They found that the Zhou army had no intention of killing them. A strong desire to survive rushed into their hearts like a wild horse. The next moment, the Qing prisoners in the front rushed towards their camp frantically. The Qing prisoners behind didn't know what happened, but seeing that everyone was running towards their camp, they also excitedly began to flee for their lives. Before they came, they were tied up by the Zhou people with their hands and stuffed with rags, so they couldn't even communicate. Afterwards, they were tied with some black bags. There were 30,000 Qing prisoners, and of course there were smart people among them. They understood that perhaps I became a trap set by the Zhou people to deal with my companions. But, even the smartest people, at this moment, seeing the hope of life, don't care so much. They ran madly to the camp in front with all their strength. The pressure of death in the rear and the hope of life in the front stimulated their adrenaline, making them rush to their camp at the fastest speed in their lives. On the Qing side, everyone looked at their companions who kept rushing towards them with a confused look on their faces, and didn't know what to do for a while. It seems that the other party just let their companions go. It seems that they didn't do anything. The soldiers of the Qing army hesitated and didn't take action. After all, it was their companions who ran towards them. In the rear, Heike Changji, Guo Jingji and others looked at these desperate Qing prisoners with complicated expressions. Heike Changji suppressed the shock in his heart and said in a deep voice. They may not know that we have done something to them. But, in the face of death, everyone is selfish. They want to live, even if it will bring destruction to their companions. They don't care about that at this time. Minister Yang has already anticipated their thoughts, and he is worthy of being the first poisoner in the Great Zhou. Generals such as Guo Jingji nodded one after another, looking at these frantically running captives. Their eyes were full of shock, mixed with admiration for Yang Yi. This Minister Yang's control of human nature is simply accurate to the extreme. It is really amazing. Heike Changji next to him sighed and shook his head at this time. Pass my order, prepare to shoot. Yes, the soldiers next to him said in a deep voice. After a while, one by one, a car with a giant crossbow was pushed out. If you want to detonate explosives at a very long distance, you can't just rely on the bow and arrow. The soldiers next to him lit the thick arrows one after another. He Kai Changji waved his hand immediately. The next moment, swish, swish, swish. Giant arrows with blazing flames made a tooth-grinding sound of breaking through the air. On the other side, Zongjia Agui was still wondering why these Zhou people let all the captives go. He suddenly saw rockets all over the sky. Oops, Zongjia Agui's eyes narrowed, there's a trap. As soon as he finished speaking, the rockets rained down on the Qing prisoners who had just arrived at the camp. Boom, a huge explosion instantly engulfed the Qing prisoner who had just shown a face of surviving a disaster, and also engulfed dozens of Qing soldiers around him. The huge explosion caused a chain reaction with terrifying flames. Boom, 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 boom. Countless explosions exploded in the Qing camp. Thousands of prisoners turned into mobile explosive packs at this time. The huge explosion engulfed the Qing camp. Zongjia Agui's face was pale, and his brain was 3.7 blank. It's over. The soldiers next to him roared and dragged Zongjia Agui away. If they stay here any longer, they will all be blown to death. The Zhou army soldiers in the distance were also stunned and horrified. They were all shocked by the terrifying power. The camp was simply a purgatory on earth. Countless broken arms and limbs, as well as a lot of burnt meat paste, made people want to vomit. Yang Yi's vicious plan made them swallow their saliva again. This king of hell is here, and he is ashamed of himself. Heike Changji next to him suppressed his inner shock, drew his weapon, and roared. Pass my order, chase. Qing Dynasty, Golden Palace. Your Majesty, urgent report from the front line. Eunuch Hai rushed in with a secret letter. Qianlong, who was drinking the ginseng tea fed by the queen, was stunned, and then a happy look appeared on his face. He smiled at Fucha Fuang, Yin Jishan and others next to him. Agui is quite fast. He has reported victory so quickly. The last time he sent a secret letter, he asked me for 10 days to take Yucheng. Fucha Fuang, Yin Jishan and other Qing ministers showed their joy. Congratulations, Your Majesty, our army has won a great victory. With Your Majesty's blessing, how can Zongjia Agui not win? Yes, Zongjia Agui can win because of the great fortune. Everyone flattered him and racked their brains to think of words of praise, fearing that they would be too slow. The atmosphere in the hall was lively. Qianlong was very happy, and his sallow face was rosy. He laughed, opened the secret letter, looked at it for a few times, and the smile on his face froze, as if his father had died. His eyes were full of horror, and his voice trembled. The Iron Buddha was completely annihilated, 200,000 of the 400,000 troops were destroyed, 80,000 were captured, and less than 100,000 people fled. He almost screamed out the last sentence. His voice broke due to fear. The atmosphere in the hall was cold. Everyone's scalp was numb, staring at Qianlong in amazement. How could it be possible? They couldn't believe what Qianlong just said was true. There were 400,000 troops. And the so-called invincible Iron Pagoda. They were beaten like this. Fucha Fuang, Yin Jishan and other ministers were so shocked that they couldn't even speak. They couldn't believe it. Qianlong was so shocked that he could hardly hold the secret letter in his hand. Impossible, absolutely impossible. Qianlong reopened the secret letter, his eyes bloodshot. How can my 400,000 troops not be a match for the Zhou people? I must have seen it wrong. Qianlong muttered, his eyes bloodshot, almost going crazy. This is the family property of his Qing dynasty for decades. How could he lose nearly 70% in one battle? Qianlong stared at the secret letter in his hand, his pupils dilated. He read it over and over again like a madman. But no matter how he looked at it, the 200,000 casualties written on the secret letter were all losses of his Qing army. Every number on it seemed like a knife cutting his heart a few times. Qianlong trembled all over, his lips trembled, but he couldn't say a word. His sallow face turned pale in an instant, his pupils shrank, and the whites of his eyes were occupied by bloodshot, looking as dense and terrifying as a spider web. He gasped and sweated on his forehead. Qianlong subconsciously covered his chest. The Empress Fucha beside him said in a low voice with a worried look on her face. Quote. Quote. She hadn't finished her words. Qianlong suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, his eyes went black, and he fell to the side. Fucha screamed immediately. Quote. Quote. Fucha Fuang, Yin Jishan and other ministers beside him widened their eyes and looked shocked. Your Majesty. Great Zhou. Council Hall. Your Majesty. Victory, victory. A guard hurriedly held a memorial and rushed into the hall in the way Jinping came down. All the ministers present were stunned and looked at the guard in surprise. Victory. There was a victory so soon. Wu Zhao held the edge of the dragon throne, her phoenix eyes full of surprise. Shengguan Wan'er beside her hurriedly walked over and opened the memorial to take a few glances, and a look of surprise appeared on her cold face. Your Majesty, General Heike said in the letter that our army annihilated 200,000 enemy troops, captured 80,000 enemies, and the Iron Pagoda was completely destroyed. Quote. Hiss. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. This horse was simply crippled by Zhang Jiagui. Such an impressive record was achieved. Xu Jingzong, Wei Yuanzhang and others were excited. This time, their great Zhou finally won a great victory. Wu Zhao's cold face couldn't help but reveal a smile at this time. Good, good, good. The Empress said 3 good things, and her inner excitement was revealed. Shengguan Wan'er immediately presented the secret letter to Her Majesty the Empress. Wu Zhao took it and read it carefully. In addition to Qin Ming's victory, the secret letter also fully described various details of the war. She glanced at it for a few times, and her fair and beautiful face showed a bit of strangeness. The Empress's eyes fell on Yang Yi. Yang Qing, when did you send the brocade bag to Heike Chengji? Is there a plan hidden in the brocade bag? Heike Chengji praised it greatly, saying that your strategy should be the first merit and directly hit the opponent's army hard. Quote. Everyone was stunned. They only knew about Yang Yi's suicide squad, but they didn't expect that this guy secretly came up with another plan for Heike Chengji. Wei Yuanzhang asked curiously, Minister Yang, what other tricks did you give to Heike Chengji? The other officials also looked at Yang Yi with curiosity. Yang Yi looked calm and said lightly, Mr. Wei, you are overpraising me. It is not a trick, but just a small trick. It is just to let Heike Chengji tie explosives to the Qing prisoners and drive them to the Qing camp. The Qing army does not know our explosives. When they see their companions running back, they will not be on guard. When the prisoners approach the Qing army, our army will use ignited rockets to detonate the explosives. All of them will be blown into pieces, that's all. The hall was suddenly quiet. Wei Yuanzhang's scalp numbed when he heard this. Regret appeared on his wrinkled old face. He wanted to slap himself. What are you asking? Which tricks did this kid come up with that were not vicious? Xu Jingzong and others opened their mouths in shock. Nima, let the captives tie explosives to friendly forces. Only you can come up with such a vicious plan. They can even imagine what the Qing prisoners will be like when they run back to the camp. Everyone shuddered. As expected of Minister Yang, if this plan had a little humanity, it would be wrong. Wu Zhao opened her rosy lips slightly, and was also shocked. She didn't expect that the little trick Yang Yi mentioned was so vicious. There was silence in the hall for a while. Wu Zhao pondered. Heike Chengji said that we can pursue the victory. What do you think, Yang Qing? Yang Yi said without hesitation. Of course, the other side has suffered such heavy losses and the field is in a low mood. The Qing dynasty is seriously injured. Now is the time to beat the fallen dog. Quote. Our army should take advantage of this time to capture more cities of the other side. Quote. Wu Zhao nodded in agreement. 1 month later, Heike Chengji captured 15 cities of the Qing dynasty in a row, unstoppable. The Qing dynasty was in a bleak state. If Qianlong had not withdrawn all the troops and defended the city, several more cities would have been lost. After that, the two armies were in a stalemate. Even so, such a record shocked the world. There has not been such a bleak war for at least 10 years. And inadvertently, the name of Yang Yi, a poisonous scholar, gradually swept the world along with the streets. Ming Dynasty. Good, good, good. Zhu Yuanzhang's vicissitudes of life were full of shock. No wonder, Yang Yi is not afraid of offending Qianlong at all, and even deliberately angered him. It turns out that he was prepared. This explosive was secretly developed by him. I heard that the Song dynasty had black gunpowder and had already used it in the military, but its power was limited and it was not presentable. But Yang Yi did make more powerful explosives. This man is really a genius. Zhu Biao's face was complicated. At this time, they had already known the opponent's winning method through the intelligence network of Jinyue. He was a little scalp numb and said with shock, "This person's methods are too cruel. The explosives are powerful but can't blow up the enemy, so he lets his own people take the explosives to self-destruct. Even if some death row prisoners died at the beginning, but the ones who died later were all soldiers in the army. Trading life for life, it's too cruel." Zhu Yuanzhang shook his head. "His methods are cruel, but they are useful. Didn't you see that the Qing people were so defeated by surprise? Fortunately, it was the Qing that was attacked. If it was any of our countries, we would suffer a great loss in this battle." There was a sigh in his tone. Zhu Biao also nodded repeatedly. Yang Yi's explosives appeared too suddenly. Without any defense, it is really hard to guard against such explosives. In addition, Yang Yi's strategy of using people to carry explosives to exchange lives for lives is too insidious and vicious. Ordinary people would not be prepared at all, if it weren't for the Qing dynasty taking a slap in the face for them. It is estimated that they are the ones who will suffer. Tang dynasty. The Taiji hall was silent. Everyone was dumbfounded. Li Shimin glanced at everyone, with shock in his eyes. What a trick to lure the snake out of its hole. We thought that after angering Qianlong, Yang Yi would definitely fail. I didn't expect that he had already made perfect preparations. A secret explosive, coupled with a group of fearless soldiers, actually killed and wounded more than 70% of the Qing army, which had several times more troops than them. Such a genius is really a great enemy of our Tang dynasty. Li Ji's eyes showed disbelief. The Qing army was defeated so badly, and was defeated by Yang Yi's two strategies thousands of miles away. Changsun Wuji smiled bitterly. He looked around. We really underestimated him. Fang Xuanling touched his beard, with shock on his face. This boy is only 20 years old, but he is so scheming. Qianlong probably thought he would win without a doubt. Du Ruhui sighed. Yang Yi's move is too insidious, using explosives tied to human bodies to send them to death. No one would be prepared for it. And the power of explosives is too great. Once these people tied with explosives rush into the camp, the formation will be broken instantly. Zhang Jiagui's defeat is not unfair, Li Jing said suddenly. Fortunately, Qing fought a battle with Zhou first and tested the bottom line. Otherwise, with Yang Yi's scheming, he would definitely keep the explosives hidden. If it is my Tang dynasty that fights Zhou, the consequences will be unimaginable. Everyone nodded with lingering fear. We suddenly thanked Qing. Qing is a slap in the face for the whole world. Dakin. How is it possible? Li Si's eyes were full of shock. Qing was defeated so miserably. Fang Quji, Wang Wan and others were stunned and their scalps were numb. They simply couldn't believe it. Under such a disadvantage, everyone thought that the Qing kingdom was going to crush the Zhou kingdom. Even if they could not destroy the Great Zhou, they could at least severely damage the Zhou kingdom. Unexpectedly, Yang Yi used a vicious plan to wipe out most of the Qing army. The difference in strength was several times. Such a situation could be reversed. Is Yang Yi still a human being? Li Si shook his head, his scalp tingling. Yang Yi's strategy was too vicious. He actually sent people to die with explosives. It's not surprising that the Qing army was defeated. Such a brutal fighting method is against the harmony of heaven. Besides him, who else can come up with such a cruel fighting method? Fang Quji and others nodded. They were also shocked. Wang Wan smiled bitterly. This man also took advantage of the prisoners' desire to survive and let them run to their own camp with explosives. But it dealt an unprecedented blow to his own army. Those Qing soldiers did not expect that. The person who dealt the heaviest blow to them was not the enemy, but their companions. Killing people and destroying their hearts is just like this. Fang Quji shook his head. The most sinister thing is not just this. Now, the strategy of using prisoners to blow up the camp has been known to all countries. This is the most terrible sequelae of Yang Yi's strategy. Li Si and others were stunned and looked at Fang Quji in confusion. Even Ying Zheng, who was silent, looked at Fang Quji. Fang Quji met the gazes of the crowd, took a breath, and said with a shocked tone. After that, any prisoners captured by the generals of the Zhou kingdom, whether they tied explosives to the prisoners or not. As long as the Zhou army soldiers deliberately drove the prisoners to the camp. With the Qing army's defeat, the enemy camp would never dare to allow the prisoners to return to the camp. Then the final result is that our own people will shoot to death those companions who are eager to live with bows and arrows. This is the real killing. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. Yes, from then on, who would dare to take the prisoners released by the Zhou kingdom? But if they don't want them, it means abandoning the soldiers. It is also a great blow to morale, and personally shooting his own companions to death. This is too vicious. Ying Zheng's face was complicated. He was a little emotional. This man is indeed extraordinary. You all underestimated him at the beginning. Although the poisonous scheme is a minor one, the winners will be the kings and the losers will be the bandits, that's all. Li Si, Wang Wei and others were embarrassed. At the beginning, they ridiculed Yang Yi for only knowing how to use poisonous tricks, and they were backfired. Now they were slapped in the face. This Yang Yi, the minister of Zhou, always used strategies that caught them off guard. Great Zhou, the memorial of Heike Chengji, now my Great Zhou has taken over 15 cities. Wu Zetian's ruddy lips curled up, and her phoenix eyes were full of smiles. Xu Jingzong said hurriedly, "Congratulations, Your Majesty. The expansion of the territory of my Great Zhou and the successive victories are all due to Your Majesty's great fortune." Quote. The other officials also congratulated. Wu Zi was overjoyed. She ascended the throne as a woman, and was already questioned. So she was more eager to make achievements than anyone else. Now, the Qing dynasty has been defeated and the territory has been expanded. This is the achievement of expanding territory that many emperors have never pursued in their lifetime. Her cold and noble face remained calm, her eyes swept across the ministers, and finally fell on He Yi. She did not forget that she was able to defeat the Qing dynasty because of this minister. The ruddy lips of the Empress slightly moved. The one who made the greatest contribution in this battle is Yang Qing. Yang Yi was stunned, and then said, "Your humble minister." Wu Zi said seriously, "Yang Yi has made outstanding contributions and has repeatedly saved the country from danger. I will appoint you as the minister of the imperial household, lead the founding county, and eat 1,000 households. I decree this." Yang Yi raised his eyebrows. The Empress is so generous. He immediately said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." Everyone was stunned and shocked. The Empress's reward was so generous. The Zhou dynasty's official positions were divided into 3 provinces and 6 departments, similar to the Tang dynasty. The highest-ranking officials of the 3 provinces were Zongshuling, Shengshuling, and Menxia Shizhong. Among them, Menxia Shizhong was also called Zuo Shang. This was a position with real power, on par with Zongshuling Xu Jingzong and Shengshuling Wei Yuanzhong. How old were Xu Jingzong and Wei Yuanzhong? How old was Yang Yi? It can be said that Yang Yi at this time was qualified to be called Yang Shang. With the favor of the Empress, it is no exaggeration to say that Yang Yi was the first person in the officialdom of the Great Zhou dynasty at this time. Even Xu Jingzong and Wei Yuanzhong, who were old, had to give Yang Yi some face. What's more, Yang Yi's title jumped from a county earl to a founding county duke. He jumped several levels and was given a fief of 1,000 households. Although there are not many thousand households, you have to know that only the princesses and princes of the royal family are qualified to have fiefs. The Empress gave it to Yang Yi without hesitation. This is a great honor. Everyone was envious. This is a real step to heaven. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.